What's up? What's up, everybody? How are we doing today? Camera looks all right. Audio sounds all right. I think everything's all right. Welcome. Episode 300. Can you believe it? Episode 300 of the live chat here today. Wow. What a... Well, I'll have a little bit to say on it in a minute, but let's just sort of set the table. Welcome, everyone, on this 30th day of April here in the year of our Lord 2026. My name is Luke Thomas. As I mentioned, this is episode 300. Like, this is Sparta of my live chat. Really appreciate you joining me on the docket today. I mean, dude, we got a loaded weekend here in combat sports. So on the MMA side, we have UFC Perth plus PFL Sioux City. Then on the boxing side, big one in the Tokyo Dome, Inoue Nakatani. And then in Las Vegas, you've got David Benavidez going up 25 pounds to fight Zurdo Ramirez. A bunch of fun stuff happening this weekend. So we'll talk about all of that, plus anything else on your mind. Thumbs up if you haven't already. Subscribe if you'd be so kind. The way this works is I put up a post on the posts section here at youtube.com/Luke Thomas. I put it up on Wednesdays. You guys fill it up. We'll go for about an hour on those, and then we'll get to the paid portion of the live chat, where if you'd be so kind, you do not have to, but if you'd be so kind, it goes a long way. You can put in a super chat donation, and we'll get to. I'll put your question on the screen, and we can get to it. The exception to that is you can get definitely a couple of those for free if you are a member, right? So members, you don't have to come up off your pockets unless you go crazy with like 15 questions, in which case at that point maybe you should. But okay, but that never really happens. You get the point. So that's it. A lot of fun stuff to talk about. A relatively interesting day in the history of this live chat. Thank you much. Excuse me. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Without further ado, let's get this party started, shall we? Okay. As a reminder, if you want, wrong one. Sorry, hang on. As a reminder, if you want the chud-free live chat, my Substack has that. It's available right here. Now, again, we welcome the chuds because, well, they're a little annoying to deal with. However, they're here, and so they get you paid, so it's better to just kind of let them rock for the most part. But if you don't want to be around that, which I certainly understand, right here, all free of that. And that I checked before we went live, that thread is up. So it's up and rocking, and we'll have a good time with it. Let me say a couple words, if I may. Episode 300. I'm not going to belabor the point. I hope I will try to make this as relatively quick as I can. But I just want to say, of all the things I've ever done in my career, honestly, this live chat might be my favorite. And I think the fact that it has been as long lasting as it has speaks to certainly not only the patronage I've been able to receive over time. And it's been weird. It started out as text based, and then it was, it's been a whole thing. But people catch it live, people catch it after the fact, people watch the video, people watch the clips, or get the audio. Like, everyone's got their own way to get through with it. But the reason why I like it so much, and the reason why I began doing the live chat on MMA fighting to begin with, is just because I wanted to go back and forth with fans. I just wanted to talk to fans. It's really quite as simple as that. I mean, yes, I like sort of the exercise of thinking through difficult questions when I can, but you get some of those wrong, but yeah, as well. The point being was, it's just really fun for me. It's really fun. I'm not trying to make it, obviously the more the merrier, certainly, but I'm not trying to make it the world's most successful podcast or anything other than just I just want to do something fun. That's it. Older I get, the more I realize actually how kind of distinctly important that ends up becoming in your life, is doing things. I mean, dude, the time is much shorter than it looks, so being invested in projects that you find rewarding, whether they could be financially rewarding too, but being rewarding to your soul is great. And I have to say, like, who could I do it with? I mean, it's, I can turn this camera on and I can just talk if I wanted to. That's true. I could do that. But the reason this whole thing works is because this is true. And you guys know it's true. I'm not telling you, I'm not buttering you up. This is the reality. This only works because of you. Like, if y'all don't have, the questions form the contours of what is going through your minds and what is of interest to you. Sometimes there's symmetry with my interest, sometimes there's not. You guys have seen that as well. But the engine of all of this, the nucleus of this, is the fan base, the MMA fan base, or other associated people who may watch this time to time. Like that's really what this is. So I don't know, man. Like listen, people like what they like and they hate what they hate, but in a world where everyone is just trying to make things as big as they are and scaling it as they are and ubiquitous as they can possibly be, and certainly we all kind of, if anyone in the content business plays a little bit of that rat race game. Nevertheless, I like this one for its simplicity. You know, I kind of appreciate it on those terms, and couldn't do it without you. So thank you for being here. It's been great. And I certainly have no intention of stopping. So I really appreciate you guys doing this for me, and I hope I've been of reasonable value to you at times, whether annoyingly or positively or maybe on occasion substantively. I don't know, but anyway, yeah. So thank you. Second thing I want to say before we get going here, and I'll adjust my time to account for the fact that there's been an unusually long preamble. This month has been insane for me. I talked about this on Substack if you guys missed it, but this month has been bonkers. The 1st of April was a Wednesday. I recall it because I had to drive to College Park. That was when I gave the guest lecture at the University of Maryland. So that was like nerve-wracking and like, you know, I didn't know how that was going to go and whatever. And, you know, it had the same predictable response that everything else I did this month had, which was initial acclaim. And then, you know, the chuds find it and there's backlash. And then I did a bunch of media. I did Dan Le Batard. I did Pablo Torre. Again, like, you know, you look at the YouTube comments, it's all positive. You look at the Twitter comments, it's all negative. So there's the same kind of cycle of this is great and then backlash. And then I did XFC last weekend, and then we're back. And then my daughter turned 7 on Monday, and then, you know, she fights this. It's been bananas. It's been truly bananas. It's been a good month. And by the way, like my politics channel, I put up 2 videos back to back that were original content. Both of them cleared 100K. I was like, it's just been crazy. It's been a crazy ass month. So, yeah, I think May is not going to slow down either. Wild times. All right, let me get my glasses on. Let's get to your questions. And again, I'll adjust. 311, like the band from Omaha. God damn, I can't see shit on these things. Let me clean these up here. If you're a parent and you haven't seen the new Pixar movie Hoppers, it's real good. I've seen some. Oh, you know what, children? I think I said it on this live chat. The French film that I saw, for kids. Well, it's for adults too. Arco, phenomenal movie. Really, really good. If you haven't checked that out. And then I saw an adult movie that was really awesome. The President's Cake. It's an Iraqi movie. Real good. Real good. I still haven't seen some other ones here, like Weapons and stuff like that. I've been meaning to see, but what are you going to do? All right. Now I can see better. Let's get this going. Okay. Nope, wrong one. Let's do this. There we go. Can you see? Yes. Grinder profile pic. Not this one, because I hadn't showered in this pic, but sure, maybe a different one for the future, you know, depending on how my fortunes change. All right. Is there a better example of how Dana White has reached billion levels of being dead inside than seeing him describe how excited he was about being so close to a shooting? Yeah, man. Yeah. I was actually calling the XFC fights when I got a text from Oscar Willis, and he was like, dude, there was a shooting at the Correspondents' Dinner. And I was like, oh my God, Jesus Christ, you know. And then I found out that like there was initially some misreporting, but you know, no one in the government was killed, mercifully. But in any event, you know, then I saw the Dana White stuff, and it was just like, I mean, again, I said this on MK a little bit, which I'll repeat here, which is that if you're in a tense and unusual situation that ultimately is proven to be quite safe, you know, I think it's worth kind of trying to put. Would you would tell that story to someone else in a really like you wouldn't say excited like a kid, but there would, this would be a story of importance to whoever you would be relaying it to. And so, what I'm trying to make is, I'm not co-signing Dana's view, but like on some level, because it was unusual, intense, however, ultimately fine, that, that kind of maybe adrenaline going through his system could have affected the way in which you interpret the whole event. Okay, fine. But at the same time, it just seems to me like one thing I'm trying to pay attention to in terms of the social forces that control us. There's economic forces, there's legal forces, but some of the social forces, or even the tech forces, and how those two interplay, is just like, for example, I was having like I'm not inherently against AI per se, but one of the things that gives me great pause is that the people who are in charge of it, the Sam Altmans and his ilk, these are misanthropes, right? They don't care about us. And it's not to say that any one technology is, well, I mean, I suppose like nuclear weapons on some level would be perhaps, that's more of a weapon than it is the technology itself. But the point I'm trying to make is, I don't know that technology can certainly be dangerous or have different potencies or effects on in different environments, but on some level, there's a degree of neutrality depending on who is using it. And the point I'm trying to make is the people in charge presently are deeply anti-human. Like, to the extent humanity can be replaced and they could profit from it, they will do that. I mean, not wholesale, but in large swaths of the white collar economy and blah blah blah. The point I'm trying to make is, like, you can't get to a place where you can hear doctor warnings about slap. You can hear these complaints about how unfair, how much athletes get paid are, and how much this can damage their lives, blah blah blah. You can't get to that place unless you've got a degree of your humanity that's been eroded. You know what I mean? Like, how can you watch slap and then what they're paid and like what these people do for their lives and like the damage that they sustain and like how they get to you and where you send them, like the way in which you interface with humanity? How can you witness these things and then come to any other conclusion than, I don't know if this is a good idea, and I don't know if this is something that is inherently humane? Now, not everything has to be humane, but like it has to be humane enough. And obviously one of the problems with that is, with slap or even MMA to a degree, depending on your perspective, is that if it's going to be an exploitation machine, it has to be some kind of balance in there. And of course there isn't really much to be said for. And so like there is just a degree of that missing. And I think partly, Dana is, I'm not a psychologist, but I would say I question to what extent that is a factor in how both Dana White finds himself in these situations of power, how he uses them, and then how that informs his judgment about others at this point. You become so transcendently wealthy and powerful that human interactions almost take on an inevitable transactionalism, and like what that does to you. And another point too is like, if you've lived such an extraordinary extreme life, maybe the only kind of thing that can get you, even, I'm not talking sexually aroused, but like aroused in the general sense, although maybe the other one too, is some kind of an extreme event. I'm spitballing here. I'm not a psychologist. I don't really know, but I think trying to look around at very rich and powerful people and then to see how many of them are still visibly in touch with their own humanity, once you begin to inventory that, it begins to, the list is not so long. Let me pull this up a little bit. Here we go. Hey, Luke, in the past, you mentioned your family's academic and professional achievements. How have they responded to your career in combat sports and the success you've had along the way? I mean, that's an interesting one. I mean, look, they don't want anything for me but good things, to be very clear. And I cannot really in any way impugn what the older I get, the less I impugn them. What I would say was, in my early part of my career, when I began to do things that I consider to be novel, get on local radio, have a local radio show, get on local television, get commentary gigs, small ones, but get commentary gigs. And then that escalated up the food chain to national television, national radio. I thought that those things were novel and interesting, and that would capture their attention. And again, I don't mean to besmirch them and suggest that it didn't, but I didn't necessarily get the kind of response that I had imagined that I would. And then, that was for me a little bewildering early, but over time I figured out that apparently it turns out this is a very common thing with families, that there's this gap between what the creator or journalist or whoever believes that they're doing and then what their family perceives it as. And then, there can be an enthusiasm gap. Funnily enough, they pay attention to all of the political stuff that I do, which has been quite surprising, to be honest with you. I think the point I wanted to make is that ultimately they just don't care about MMA. They don't watch MMA. It's not a thing. Most of my family aren't even really sports fans. I'm actually the most sports fan guy in my family that I know of, certainly in my immediate family. So I just don't think it was really on their radar. Not that they weren't, I just don't know if what I was doing, the way it registered to me, did not register to them. But I want to be cautious. Like for a long time, that was quite frustrating. But now I'm in a place where I don't really feel that way much anymore. And strangely, they like the political stuff, which soup caught me wildly by surprise, because I would argue that, given just the time and how little I've done it, if I really lean into it, I believe that the quality of what I could do, for example, with tape study, is kind of higher than what I'm able to do right now in the political space. And yet they've got significantly greater attention. They send stuff to me. They make comments. They encourage it. They watched my lecture without me asking. Like, very surprising. They're very surprising. But again, like in the end, dude, like I don't want to tell people who are taking on things where there's risk and it's uncertainty, and then maybe you get a little bit of things going for you, and the world that you thought might pat you on the back doesn't necessarily do it. You kind of have to get to my recommendation for everybody, because again, I only found out about is the way I'm feeling normal, and then I talked to other creators who've done similar things, and they all had pretty similar stories. I would just caution people, you got to let all that shit go. If your parents are super, I will say this too, by the way, my Colombian in-laws, they watch a lot. I can't believe it. They're super on top of it. It's crazy to me, so they're just really kind and generous people. But I just think at the end of the day, dude, you got to do what you're doing for you. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice to get a pat on the back when you get it. You won't always be there. Sometimes you're going to be, shit's going to go bad too. You got to be doing this for you. That's what gives it value, or for the connection you make with others or something. You know what I mean? But not to do something and then be like, like you gotta let that go. It's frankly, I look back on it as childish, is maybe partly true, also a little strong. It's not wrong to want the embrace of others for what you do, if you feel like that has value. I think all of us might feel that way, but again, I just sort of go back to the idea that like the thing that will really sustain you, to me, is not to be like looking for external validation really in any way. Do things that self-satisfy, Luke, tell LIL, Long Island Luke, to ramp up the soundboard on MK again. I don't know. The guy that complained does not speak for all of us. I mean, he's using it. There's just a balance to it. There's really a balance to it. By the way, I can announce this. Jimmy Smith is going to be on MK tomorrow. So it'll be me and Jimmy Smith. Looking forward to that. I haven't done a broadcast with him in a long ass time. Sirius XM days or something like that. Long pre-pandemic, I think. So that'll be a real fun time. But there's a healthy balance. We're still trying to figure that out. Luke, thoughts on Dana? Okay, we kind of went over this one. Referring to the scenes at the White House Correspondents' Dinner as fucking awesome. I'd have to assume he was on cocaine as per usual. I don't know. He did an interview with Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, and he seemed sober, but it seemed to be in poor taste. Yeah, I mean, we kind of been over this one at this point, but it's a fine question. In light of the first ever sub 2-hour marathon, what's the single greatest ever human athletic achievement in your view? Dude, that's an insane one. That dude was running. I think it was something approximating a 4.5 minute, maybe slightly more than that, a 4.5 minute mile. And the motherfucker was doing it for 26.2 miles. Dude, what? Like, that is, I don't know about y'all. I'm not a cross country guy. I've never run a sub 5-minute mile ever. I've run 6 and then just under 6 one time in the fucking Marine Corps. And that was it. 6, my best ever PFT was 18 minutes. So that's 3 miles. So I averaged 6 minutes. Maybe the first minute I was a little bit under, but you know what I mean? Like, I've never done a full mile, and except for once, basically the answer is 6 minutes is what I can achieve, realistically speaking. And this dude was running 26.2 miles at each of them, averaging a pace of basically 4.5, like I think 4 minutes and 40 seconds. That's like hard to comprehend. I mean, that seems like something a superhero would do. It's just absurd. You're asking about like big time lifts. I think big time athletic achievements, that would be certainly, dude, a sub 2-hour marathon is otherworldly. I mean, you have to both be genetically gifted and to have like, world-class training, and you have to be driven to like extraordinary intensity. You know what I mean? You have to hit the lottery genetically, but then also do all the other things to the most insane degree to be able to do a sub 2. I know that shoe technology plays a role here. Nevertheless, dude, 4.5 or 440, whatever it was per minute. This dude's running. That's just out of control. The first time we saw 500K deadlifted was a big deal. That's a big deal. That was a really, really big deal. That's an important one. Getting a 500 total in weightlifting, which I don't think anyone's really done yet. I mean, maybe there's some like esoteric Russian, but I don't believe that's right. But somebody who can let's say clean and jerk 275 and then can snatch 225, which puts you at a 500 total. That's something of a holy grail as well. But oh my God, bro, like a sub 2-hour marathon. I mean, you look at Barry Bonds' overall career statistics, that's one thing, but you're talking about like one athletic event. I would throw in the deadlift, we're starting to see obviously, 500 and some change now. So interesting athletic barriers that are being smashed. Luke, I'm doing a master's in sports psychology, and I'm curious about your overall opinion on the discipline and whether you think it's being underutilized in combat sports. Everyone always says MMA fighters are reliant on mental fortitude, resilience, and many other psychological factors, yet most fighters rarely, if ever, work with a sports psychologist. Someone like Cowboy Cerrone openly admitted he was sick with nerves before almost every fight. That's a textbook arousal regulation problem that sports psychology can directly address. Yet it never seemed to be treated as something worth fixing. I'm not saying a sports psychologist would automatically fix any mental issues that MMA fighters have, but I do think they're overlooked in combat sports. In every elite team sport, psychologists are embedded as standard. So is there a stigma in MMA around admitting you need that kind of support? And do you see real value in it becoming more utilized in combat sports in the future? Would love to hear your thoughts on it. Thanks. I want to be very clear about something. I think MMA fighters are personally the most sensitive people I've ever come across. Tiny little words will shatter them. And it's it's hard to comprehend that it can be that way. But until you're actually in the industry and you're trying to book them for interviews, and like they'll come back with being like, yeah, but you said his opponent had an advantage in striking. It'll be someone who's like a fucking K1 world champion. Be like, yeah, probably. That doesn't mean I think he's going to win. And even if I did, like, none of this is insulting. It's just, we're just trying to assess relative strengths and weaknesses. And then they'll just be like, no more interviews. It's part of the reason why I don't really do them much anymore. But on the terms of their toughness, it is unlike anything I've ever seen. Anthony Smith, and I saw another guy in PFL do it recently, handing their teeth to their cornerman in the middle of a round, or the referee or something, in Anthony Smith's case. I've seen guys willingly tell doctors that they don't mind getting digits amputated if it meant a quicker recovery. Just and then they would tolerate it to a degree that it was incredibly unhealthy. They would get staph and not treat it. Like there is a physical durability that is not just like what the skin can maintain, but the mental commitment to punishment, self-punishment, is unlike anything I've ever seen in my life. But to your point, it's a slightly different question. There's simply no question that it's not going to be for every fighter for every fight, but it's obviously going to be the case that for many fighters in many fights, having worked with a sports psychologist could yield important dividends. And I want to be clear about something, not merely just for professional outcomes, but for personal self-awareness as well. Just because we're trying to dial in how we feel about something for a specific sporting event doesn't mean you won't do a degree of personal interrogation that yields a kind of self-discovery or self-understanding that actually is much more important than that. I realize this is not the primary reason why we're hiring these people, but it should nevertheless be included in kind of the suite of things that you could get from it. There's simply no question in my mind, but the problem is going to be this with fighters all the time, dude. These guys, they live and die in their own mind. You have to show them that there's measurable benefit. Right. This is kind of like, they don't trust a lot of traditional institutions. Again, there'll be exceptions to this. They don't trust a lot of traditional paths of accumulating knowledge. Again, some exceptions to this. And so there's just deep skepticism about like what this could do. But if you could show it to them and prove it to them, that'd be one thing. But the real thing you're going to come up against is like guys like Gilbert Burns use them. He talked to us about using them. The issue is the financialization of it. Like, just not many fighters are going to have the money and the access to this to make it work. And teams, Derek Nixick runs a great gym, but they're not going to have, I suppose they always could, but even gyms like that or ATT, they're just not in a position to be hiring like an in-house sports psychologist. And again, the athlete, it doesn't matter if you have an in-house sports psychologist, even if people try to use them, they're not really committed to the process. This is kind of like a volunteer army. You need somebody who, for that to work, the person has to be providing real value. And then the person who's looking for real value has to be truly committed to the process. That's when things work. But if any part of that is out of whack, the results may vary, right? So I certainly, your point is well stated. If you had these things and if they were more adopted, wouldn't you have a series of greater outcomes professionally or personally by virtue of using them? There's simply no doubt. It's just there's going to be a lot of obstacles to that. And you have to understand the fighter mentality as best you can. And in my experience, it's been that they're going to be skeptical of stuff like this. Not all of them, certainly, not every time. No, definitely not. But at scale, there's going to be a lot of resistance. What do you think was the single most effective piece of corner advice given to a fighter between rounds that changed the outcome of a fight? Not just hype speeches, but specific advice. Hype speeches are important to an enormous degree. The reality is about hype speeches is that most of them fail. That's why it's like they're fun and they're cinematic, but then the guy goes out there and you can't pull blood from stone, and then they go and they just get wrecked by someone they were getting their shit rocked by in a previous round. So yeah, it doesn't work. Yeah, then it doesn't really work. But dude, you guys have all seen corner speeches that worked. Corner speeches like Teddy Atlas for Timothy Bradley. I don't know if that was the Provodnikov fight. I forget which one, but that shit propelled him. And then in the MMA side with Leon Edwards in the rematch with Kamaru Usman between the 4th and the 5th round before he hit the head kick. Like, these things are real. They're real. They can be real. So I don't want to dismiss hype jobs as, just trash. A lot of them are trash, but sometimes it can be the most pivotal thing that happens in a fighter's life. Should be acknowledged too. In terms of specific pieces of advice, I am trying to think. The reality is, man, that's a good question. Ray Longo telling Weidman to punch a hole in Anderson Silva's chest as a way to lower it, to catch him on that level was noteworthy and it set up some of the other stuff that came behind it, but that's not exactly right. It's a good question. I have to think about that. I'm not sure what the answer is off the top of my head, but there's definitely been some good ones, certainly, and we've talked about them. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what the last really good one was. You know, George St. Pierre telling Greg Jackson he tore his groin, and then Greg Jackson's like, I don't give a fuck. You know, here's what you're going to do. And then, you know, he goes and executes it. But that's not exactly your question either. That's a good question. I have to think about that. Okay, is Usman versus Morales the next fight to make for both at welterweight? If so, how do you see that one playing out, and how do you find it? And do you find it odd that Usman appears to have ducked Belal, who was also ranked ahead of him is similar in age and has a more favorable skill set for Usman to face than Morales? I feel like everything Belal does well, Usman does better, but he genuinely seems to not want to fight him, even though Belal called him out multiple times. I think the idea is that he might have the feeling that if he beats Belal, it doesn't get him much, which that's not to say that beating Belal is some walk in the park, if you can even do it. Let's assume he could do it and would do it. What does the UFC consider that? Because ultimately that's what you have to be. That's what you're auditioning for, is what does this mean for them? How do they see it? And of course, you know, you can take to the microphone and help shape opinion, but at the end of the day, it's their call, right? You can say yes or no, but they're the ones designing everything. And so it's a question of that versus if you fight Morales, and maybe Usman knows it's a tougher fight, but he might feel he has still some stylistic advantages. And I think UFC would look at that very favorably. You know, they would look at that and be like, ooh, yes. And also that'd be really great for Morales if you won, you know? So it's old versus young, you know, there'd be a ton of value for the UFC to make it in that direction. So I can see why Belal wanted it, because Belal is trying to go up against a guy who, to your point, maybe Usman's got some advantages, but they're close in skill set ish. And if you're Belal and you fight Usman, well, now you got a big scalp in terms of a name anyway on your resume. I get why he wants it. That seems totally, you know, noteworthy, or easy to understand, rather, I should say. It's the other one that's a little bit more interesting. Yeah. What do you think of Belal calling out Ariel Helwani's support of the Israeli genocide on Twitter today? Yeah, I did see that. I think what was it? Let me see if I can remember. Oh, yes. Ariel was talking about, if I recall correctly, that he's kind of concerned about the security situation between Strickland and Chimaev, and in particular the inflammatory things that Strickland has said that would be, you know, deeply insulting and potentially triggering of violence. And he was concerned about it, quite rightly, in my judgment. And then, you know, and then Belal takes to Twitter. Let me see exactly what he said. Let me pull that up, because I might be misremembering here. Hang on. Let me pull that up. I recall I remember what Belal wrote, but I cannot remember exactly every part of it here. Hold on. Here we go. Oh, okay. This is it. He wrote, the guy talking about inflammatory comments is the same guy sitting there supporting a genocide of innocent women and children. That's what he wrote. This is the tweet right there. What do I think about it? Surprised it didn't happen sooner, to be honest with you. Belal, in my opinion, has been very visibly Palestinian in the last couple of years, you know, longer than that, obviously. But at one time, what media day was that? Fuck, this was was this might have been 2016. And I was interviewing Belal about Palestinian stuff. And it could have just been he didn't want to talk to me. I want to be very clear about that. But like, he didn't bite on any of it. It didn't. And I wasn't trying to like, no, what I meant was I was trying to like talk about it with him. Like, hey, is this a thing of source of pride and public identity and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and he just didn't seem very interested in it. And again, it's fine, dude. Like, It's fight week. They can talk about what they want to talk about. They can ignore what they want to ignore. It's their show. You're simply there to document it. I just didn't know if that was a thing he wanted to discuss, and it did not appear to me that he wanted to discuss it. And so I was like, all right, well, listen, some of these people want to make it very public with their identities, some don't, and that's you just got to let that be what it is. And then obviously since October 7th, he's been significantly more. And again, he may have been coming out to the same music the whole time. I genuinely don't know. He obviously comes out to very pro-Palestinian music. Point I'm trying to make is it's become a lot more obvious to me anyway in the last couple of years, quite understandably. I think the reality is, man, there are just a lot of people in the country who I do think in their heart of hearts are well-intentioned. And I'm going to speak in generalities here because I think I've noticed this with a lot of different people, some of them Jewish, some of them not. It's hard. It's just if people who are either heavy or light to heavy Israel supporters, they again, whether or not they are Christian or Jewish, there can be, in fact, the Christians can sometimes be even more vociferous about it. But in any case, I have noticed that, for example, there have been people who I worked with previously who I just know are good people who have treated me my whole life with kindness. And it very, very, very much surprised me to see them double down on their support for Israel after October 7th. And I mean, I'm not talking like October 8th or 9th. I mean, when it was just obvious they were slaughtering these people left and right. And I was kind of very dismayed by that. And I just don't think that my personal belief, this is just observational, is that there are a lot of people who are nominally or aggressively, but in either case, supportive of Israel, and they do not understand how for the rest of us, there's no going back to the anti-status quo of whatever status Israel enjoyed. It is, to me, the litmus test of all litmus tests. Either you can get this one right or you just cannot be trusted to get the other ones right, which isn't to say that they get them all wrong either. But the point I'm trying to say is, dude, when the chips are fucking down, and the chips are down on this one, there has to be real clarity about what has happened and who is responsible and the scale of devastation. And there's simply no question that this is, again, the scale of the horror in Iraq might actually be bigger because of just how long it lasted and just how wide a swath we cut through the country in order to achieve our objectives. But I don't think I've ever seen anything in my life as morally heinous as what has happened to the people of Gaza. I think that's probably the worst. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe you could say, I mean, I don't know how in tune I was with what happened in Rwanda between the how was it, the Tutus and the Hutsis, am I getting that right? I forget their names now. Please forgive me. It's been so long. My understanding is the slaughter that happened there was quicker and also and numerically greater as well. And I just wasn't as in tune with it. It wasn't broadcast to us in that way. But in terms of anything I could visibly witness, it's the worst thing I've ever seen. Yeah, it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It is the greatest crime and moral atrocity of my lifetime that I have visibly borne witness to. And I think, obviously, for a lot of Palestinians, there's no going back to any, this is such a break from any sense of the value of international rules, the mendacity and the barbarity of men, the impunity of the military of Israel, and you can go on down the line. For them, there's just simply no going back to whatever detente that was there before. That's gone. And I'm not for out there. I think I want to save my energy for, for the most part, for elected leaders and other people who are in positions of genuine power. But I just think if you're one of these people who are well-intentioned, and you might very well be, and I know these people, I know some of these people, they're very, very well-intentioned, and otherwise in their lives live ordinary, peaceful, dare I say, totally ethical or, reasonably ethical existences. But there's just this unwillingness to account for what Israel has done. And there's going to be friction between the rest of us and them. Because I can't unsee what I've seen. And I never had it. I mean, again, Scott Coker lashed out at me in 2018 when I asked why Bellator was in Israel to begin with. This is not a new issue for me. This is something I've known my whole life. But even after October 7th, my sense of my moral horror it's been so overwhelming. I don't know how to see the world the same anymore. And it's ongoing, by the way. It's not even this, there might be, it's not at the same level of attack. And by the way, to say nothing of what has happened to my mother's homeland, and they've destroyed Lebanon. They're taking key parts of it. Like, there's no, I don't know if ever in my life I'll have warm feelings towards the government of Israel. I don't know how that would be possible, absent a complete overhaul in their leadership, as well as, frankly, the views of the society there, which give great support to the things that they have undertaken. So, I just feel like there's not enough awareness. There's not enough awareness and acceptance of the reality of the situation. And for the rest of us, that kind of moral horror is untenable. I would also, let he who's without sin cast the first stone. I think, I'll just leave it at that. I'm not necessarily co-signing the beef that Belal has with Ariel. I want to be clear about that. I don't wish to get in the middle of it, but you're asking me, like, do I understand not merely that he's doing it because he is Palestinian? Sure. But that on top of it, like, this moral horror is so overwhelming that it kind of just destroys any ability to, look the other way for peaceability for some of these folks. That's kind of the difference here. It's that it's just the horror is so uniquely bad that it just destroys the ability to have the normalcy that we once enjoyed, the anti-status quo, so to speak, ANTE. This person writes, I love the way your live chat blends politics with MMA and other topics. It's really a great part of my week, so thank you very much for the channel. Thank you. Do you like Zeteo Media and Mehdi Hassan, and would you join a broader independent media channel like theirs if invited? I'm down for just about anything, for the most part. I did I did The Bulwark. It's not out yet. Do you guys know The Bulwark? Bulwark, like Bulwark the Obstacle. They're basically like William Crystal works for them. Sarah Longwell works for them. I didn't talk to them. I talked to Tim Miller, and it was a great conversation. So I'm willing to talk to just about anybody, to be honest with you. Like, working there, I don't know, but sure. I have paid for Zeteo. I currently pay for Zeteo. I use it less and less. I think it sometimes has some real value. I think sometimes it just it doesn't do a lot. I'm more of a drop site guy. I'm like, that kind of reporting to me, and not everyone can do what drop site does. I get, but that kind of a thing is, to me, a little bit closer to my interests. Again, like some of the people that I really like, yeah, I'll leave it there. With what happened at the White House dinner party, will the UFC White House event be changed in any way? Man, isn't that a great question? Man. Okay. Surely at this point, if you're either the UFC or the Trump White House or Secret Service or whatever, surely you must be saying to yourself, given what happened in Butler and given what happened at the intersection of Florida Avenue and Connecticut Avenue in Northwest Washington, D.C., surely at this point, and there's other ones too, I suppose, surely at this point you're like, we might need extra security. Guys, I hope you can understand this one. I don't think that the Chuds will be happy about this, but I actually do think you should hear me out on this one just for a second. Now, as much as I dislike Trump, I would not wish to see him assassinated. This would be very, very terrible. This would be very, very terrible for the country, among a variety of other reasons why it should never happen. Political violence is, a symptom of a diseased kind of system as well. We don't want that. It's real bad. So I'm glad that the guy who appeared to be like a blue sky kind of guy, or who tried to kill Trump or administration officials, I'm glad he did not succeed, because that would have been real, real bad. However, surely you can agree that every president, because of their high-profile nature and the polarized nature of our politics, especially now, surely you can agree that their crazies are always going to want to kill them. So, for example, right, you had Hinckley being like, I wanted to impress Jodie Foster, and that's why I shot Ronald Reagan. Like, okay, I don't think you're doing that great, John. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, dude, Trump has an ability to bring out the crazies in a unique capacity, unlike anything I've ever fucking seen in my lifetime. Anyway, I'm sure it's been worse in other times, but like the crazies, like there just tends to be this magnetism. Either they're for him or they're against him. It can be in either way, but just the kind of friction that his presence and his acts and the events in which he's associated with, that the friction that it foments, it's undeniable. Like, he is a magnet for disaster. I don't know how else to say it. So that's one thing I'm concerned about. To say nothing of, like, is the Secret Service locked in, you guys? How many articles have we seen about them just like not being that great at this, or the security wasn't as tight, or they didn't check the sniper position, which either means, one, the conspiracy theorists are correct, or two, y'all are incompetent. It's either one or the fucking other, man. And neither of them is exactly exculpatory for their behavior. It's like, it's so given all of that, it's like, and then Dana White being like, this was awesome. It's like, are you focused on safety? I'm not saying they're not, but I don't know if everyone's got their eye on the fucking ball here. I've been thinking about my own coverage. It's like, it's a backyard kind of event for me. I was one of these guys on the live chat early being like, how do you feel about the security situation? And because obviously this was announced even before the Iran war. And I was like, I don't really have, they got these big ass crowds all the time, right? They got inaugurations. They've got Jan 6. They've got 4th of July. 4th of July, there's tens and tens of thousands of people on the National Mall. And those seem to go pretty smoothly for the most part, right? So it's like, it's not like they've done it. But then the Iran war happened. You're like, okay, that's not great. And now this thing happened, and you're like, among other security failures by the Secret Service, and you're like, dude, I don't know about this one. I'm not predicting that it will be there. And God, for the love of God, I don't pray, but if you do, this is a great one to be like, maybe put a little deposit in the piggy bank on this one, so nothing bad happens, because that would be real bad for everybody, and nobody wants that. Nobody in their right mind anyway wants that. But like, yeah, I'll be honest. Like, I've taken the concerns around security a lot more seriously now that things have changed internationally, and it seems like maybe even to a degree domestically. Where the guy's going to be. There's going to have to be, I'm going to guess there's going to be some kind of plexiglass around the top of that apparatus they're constructing, or at least around where they're sitting, to avoid any kind of shooter, or God only knows, bro. But like, they're like, oh, again, the taxpayers aren't paying for this. And I'm like, I just got to tell you, I just don't believe that. I'm not saying that TKO is not footing, the majority of the bill or all of the bill for certain parts of it. But like, the amount of MPD you need, that's the local police department, the amount of MPD you're going to need for traffic, for security, for crowd control, it's going to be significant. There's going to be liaisons there, to say nothing of park police that are going to have to be there as well. It's a separate police force, separate from MPD. They're going to have to be there, among other kinds of law enforcement that are going to be there as well. You're paying for all of that overtime. I don't think that's right. I don't believe that. That's going to be in the millions and millions of dollars to do something like that, to say nothing of the apparatus that has to be at the White House itself, and in the event of a disaster, God forbid, in the event of a disaster, what's the security protocol, blah, 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 all this stuff. dude, that's extremely expensive. And even if you get it right, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it is more probable than not that everything will be fine, right? The likeliest thing is that everything will be fine. But I don't know if it's a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination, Yeah, I'm a little concerned. I don't really understand this question. I got this one last week. If you could debate anyone in the media world, combat sports and or politics, who would it be and why? I mean, you mean like who would I like to go head to head with to dunk on? Because that would Bari Weiss, I guess. You know what I mean? Bari Weiss, that would be a fun one to do. But I don't wake up and be like, I want to fucking debate this bro or whoever. I don't think of it on those terms, Look, it's cool how you're open about your struggles with anxiety, though I'd say it's more accurate to say anxiety struggles with you. Do you have any advice for people who have anxiety, generalized or social, either one? Thanks. Yeah. The only thing I can say about this is it's actually gotten a lot better recently. The backlash to my lecture was a little unsettling, but in general, it's been, I'm doing much better. The only thing I can tell you is there can be any number of ways in which these kinds of forces can be minimized, even eliminated, certainly controlled. The only piece of advice I would have is do not let it go unaddressed, because that's what I did. Or do not let it go unaddressed, or just the only addressing that you do is the masking of a problem, right? Where I'd be like, oh, I've got anxiety. Well, let's go out and drink. You know what I mean? And then you're numbing yourself to the point where you don't even have to worry about it anymore. That's not really solving it. And then because the problem is, you that day you didn't have to confront your anxiety. Congratulations. But your anxiety grew by a little bit that day, and then that, and then that, and then that, and then that. And then it gets to a point where it becomes truly like a medical ailment that you now need a lot more attention and help and intervention around. And that's a thing to avoid. That's that's what I did. Like, oh, I'll just ignore this, I'll go to the gym more. I'll drink more. Anything other than confronting what the actual issue is. This is a recipe for, here's how this is going to go. Let me explain this to you. Sooner or later, you are going to have a confrontation with your anxiety. Sooner or later. But the longer you wait, the more difficult the confrontation becomes. And I wish I had understood that a long time ago, because it used to be so easy to control. And then it got to a point where it was just absolutely overwhelming. And it's still this way. I've said it before, dude, nothing can be wrong. Zero. Bills paid, bank accounts full, family is healthy, had a good day. I have to get up early for travel. Trainer planes on time. Uber shows up exactly when it's supposed to. Like nothing's wrong. Like this is just a normal day. And my anxiety at night will be like, because you just can't control it anymore, right? That's what you want to avoid. So, hey, Luke, spelled Luke. Will Justin be the hardest hitter Ilia has faced so far in his professional career? If those shots land, including some leg kicks, how does Ilia wear them? The leg kicks will land. They landed for Charles, but Ilia tends to be able to find ways around them. But you're asking, like, who's going to be the hardest hitter? Well, I mean, Poirier is a pretty hard hitter too. Eddie Alvarez can be a hard hitter at times. It could be the case that Ilia is the hardest hitter, but what I will say that I'm sure about is that in terms of like the precision of timing and then the accuracy of the punch combined with power, he's never faced someone like Ilia. That I am sure about. You know what I mean? Like he's faced, dude, fucking Justin Gaethje has been in the trenches, bro. He's faced some devastating punchers, but a devastating puncher who's like real technical with it. And again, Poirier is technical too, but not to the degree that Ilia is special. Poirier is good to great, maybe even elite, depending on your perspective. Ilia is special, is like a level above that as far as I'm concerned. So, and I have great respect, obviously, for Dustin Poirier, but yeah. All right. Volk versus Aljo felt like a complete fool's matchup about 2 years ago when both were champs. Now I'm actually interested. Is that because Volk has fallen off and Aljo kind of seems like the same fighter he's been? Weird to think that with Volk recapturing the belt while Aljo has not. The fight is, well, it depends on your perspective. I mean, I think that the fight could be interesting, but you also have to consider there is a very realistic world where Volk ends up being something of a bad matchup because he's able to, for the most part, stuff takedowns, prevent back takes, kind of keep it standing, and then piece up Sterling over the course of 25 minutes. Like that's a real possibility of what you could get. But certainly the other ones exist. So there is, I think that's one perspective, but another one is that he could be a reasonably good test for him. Certainly has, championship experience, right? Championship medal even still. And like the other part too is like you would at least say Aljo's got a different skill set than Volk. I mean, obviously they've got some overlapping skills, clearly, but like the things that make Aljo special are not necessarily the things that make Volk special, and vice versa. And so not only is there at least some interpretation that like Aljo could be a reasonable threat to him, but you can kind of take that a little bit more seriously because he's bringing to the table things that are his game and not really part of Volk's game. You're like, oh, there's an interesting contrast here, and that contrast, obviously, also with the success that he's had, may give you the belief, not without merit, that he has a real chance at a victory, and it's worth taking seriously by virtue of this differentiation. I think that's kind of what's happening because the other like contenders, I mean, Lopez had his shot, and I mean, I don't know what that was. Yair's not, he already got beat, and Ortega's out, and Movsar's obviously up there. We'll see how that goes, but there's not a lot of other interesting names at this point right now at 45. And so there's something to be said for that. I think it could be a good fight, but it really just depends on your perspective about whether you think Aljo is a real threat or if he matches up poorly against Volk. Someone saying nice things about me. I appreciate it. Here we go. Thoughts on the concept of wins aging? Great question. And what I mean is something that happens after the fact having an effect on a win. For example, Justin's win over Tony aging poorly because Tony would go on a losing streak after, or DJ's win over Henry would age greatly because he would become double champ. To me, the concept is silly and think you should get credit for beating the version of said fighter for that fight only. What are your thoughts? So, okay. It's a great question. That's what I mean about this chat, bro. This is a great question. That's why I fucking, this kind of, I mean, there's all been good questions all day, but this kind of shit is like, I'm very lucky to have you. I'm very lucky to have you all. I hope you understand that. I know that. Okay? To answer the question, okay. In a sense, I don't agree that the win over Tony by Justin aged poorly. I know what you mean. It precipitated a losing streak. But he beat the fuck out of Tony. He changed Tony's career. The reason he went on a losing streak is because of the butchering that he put Tony through, right? That's the difference. I know what you mean. Sometimes a guy will lose and then it'll follow another, losing streak, and you'll be like, oh, that guy was not that good. You kind of caught him on the tail end of things. This one, the one with Justin's a little bit different. It became the tail end. And I know that Tony was a little bit older, but it became the tail end because of the unique amount of damage that Justin handed out. To me, that one doesn't age poorly. There are other cases where what you're describing is, oh, well, a guy goes on a losing streak, and how much does that matter in the middle of a losing streak? You know what I mean? I certainly understand that, but I think I look at it a little bit differently. Although this is one way to look at it. What I think is more interesting is who did you beat? How did you beat them? When did you beat them? How old were you? How old were they? What kind of streak were they on? Again, how did you beat them via decision? If it was decision, was it close? If you stopped them, how did you do it? And so you end up saying, hey, how many title defenses does someone has? And then not all title defenses are worth the same, but you can even go specific. What did it mean for Robbie Lawler to beat Rory McDonald? Not just in this almost cinematic, violent way, but what is the value of that win? And it won't have the same value now. Neither is still competing, but the point I'm trying to make is there is a question about the particulars of the matchup, what status each had, and the method of victory, the dominance of the victory, the strength of the victory, and then to what extent that can be measured against the quality of the opposition rather than the streak that either came before or after it. Those can be relevant too, but you understand what I'm saying? This is, who did you beat? How did you beat them? When did you beat them? Hey, I beat, for example, someone was making a point oh, Sterling never gets a finish. And then they looked at the guys that, he has beaten a bunch of the ones he's faced more recently, and they've hardly ever been finished. You know what I mean? They're Aljo's not finishing him. Turns out no one else is. You know what I mean? So there's a sense of proportionality and measurement that can come with these kinds of things as well. So it's to me, I'm trying to think of an old win. For example, Fedor's win over Crow Cop. This was not only number one versus number two. That's why it matters. That was number one versus number two in the world. You know what I mean? And not just that, Crow Cop was a fucking beast at that time based on what he had done, beating Nogueira, right? I mean, this was a huge deal, big stakes, and Fedor outclassed him. Didn't stop him, but outclassed him and had a great game plan. That was the other part too, the brilliance of the game plan that went into that, constantly putting him on his heels with this light but consistent pressure so he couldn't set for his kicks. It was just, it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. That kind of stuff ages well. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Rather than context matters, but there's other kinds of context that also matters. Someone's asking if I ever worked or talked to Jack Slack. I have not. You two are easily my favorite to listen to on MMA, and it would be cool if you guys had a live chat or something. Jack's cool, or whatever his real name is, but no, I've never spoken to him. Brother, you're asking the wrong guy. What's this? Luke, me and my girlfriend are coming to NYC for the first time this weekend from Liverpool. Any good food recommendations, things to do? Is this a serious question? You're going to arguably the greatest city in the world. Any good food recommendations? Brother, Instagram is full of them. I wouldn't even, dude, I don't even, you could have the best food of your life, and I'm being dead serious, and never leave Queens. I wouldn't even know where to fucking start in New York City, bro. Just look up what the viral shit is out there on Belly, Beli, and you got to do the sites, man. You got to do the top of the Empire State. You got to do the Statue of Liberty. You got to do all that shit. You should walk Broadway top to bottom. That's one of my favorite. People don't. I walk across the Brooklyn Bridge too. This is small shit, but you can take water taxi tours and shit too. But my favorite tourist thing to do, I'm being dead serious, is to start from Battery Park, take Broadway all the way up to Columbia, the university. You can it takes a while. It's several miles, but it's a brilliant walk. I love that shit. Look, I mostly agreed with your BJJ video, especially on the eras part. I also think it's worth noting that if people think heavyweight MMA sucks, imagine heavyweight BJJ where there's even less money involved, especially during the primes of Buchecha and Rodolfo. You also asked where the athleticism went. I mean, look at Rodolfo's physique when competing in BJJ. I know there's elite testing in BJJ, but I don't know. I think both guys competing in a second sport in their late 30s after a career of maybe dabbling in the dark arts might be a reason why they don't appear as explosive. Also, Buchecha was competing either against fat guys or dudes like Rodolfo who are way smaller than him. Yeah, there's a fair amount of that. I mean, there were some good guys during that time. Abraham Marte was pretty good. Who's the huge honor for me out of BJJ Fanatics? What's his name? With the over under Bernardo Faria. He had the over under pass. That was sick. He was really good at that. But yeah, I put out a BJJ video because everyone's like, is BJJ fake now? I'm like, it's definitely not fake. And the good news is the guys who are competing now are going to have a much more MMA ready skill set because of all the wrestling, both to takedowns, wrestling up. All of that is like become much more advanced. It's much more no-gi. Wrestling overall is better. There's better arm drags and foot sweeps and inside and outside trips and you name it. Like wrestling's gotten way better in jiu-jitsu relative to even 10, 15, especially 15 years ago. So then again, it's not the gi anymore. So there's like a lot of reasons that the adaptability I think is going to be better long-term. But, it's painful to watch Buchecha like just do poorly. Because it's like the opposite of how I understood him for the majority of the time I've ever watched him. He's just been not only dominant, like massively dominant, Luke, when asked about his recent performances, Bo Nickel had an interesting response. He said, "I'm new, bro. I'm new to this. Given the length of time that he's been competing and had to adjust to MMA, do you think this is a valid excuse? Do you think Alex Pereira, a fighter who similarly approached MMA with a dominant, albeit different single skill set, was more developed around this time in his UFC career?" Yes. I think he also transitioned to MMA later than Bo Nickel did. So Bo's got a lot of competitive experience, but maybe a different kind of professional experience, certainly. Not everyone is going to have the same level of uptake speed. People learn at different speeds. People get better at different speeds. Part of what has made Poatan special is in part he's dealing with an easier division. It's just a reality. I'm sorry, it's true. But the other one is that he appears to be a very quick learner, right? And he's got Glover who can just give him the essentials and the fundamentals and make it all work. Like we talked about this formula that makes that team as dynamic as they are. Obviously Bo is a prodigious wrestling talent. I mean, there can be no argument to the contrary. But in terms of like adapting to MMA, not everyone picks it up with the same speed. So I think one of the maybe underrated factors of the development of a guy like Poatan is just how fast, even later in his athletic life, he's able to make adaptations or growth in his overall skill set. That fast ability to learn is pretty critical. And again, a lot of it is just defense. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Poatan had a takedown on Izzy, for example, but in general, it's just defensive work. He's not out trying to necessarily, for the most part, take down Ankalaev. Whereas Bo is trying to learn striking. He's not trying to learn striking defense only so he can just wrestle. So it's a little bit harder to do. Defense, to me, defense is learned less because it's less prioritized. But in a sense, defense, if you want it to be defensively, I mean, again, defense can be hard to learn too, but defense tends to come first and then offense tends to come second. Again, there can be changes to this. So the issue is that also Bo is trying to add to what he's doing, not by adding defensive elements, although there's part of that too, but adding a whole universe of offensive elements. That's not exactly what Poatan is doing. So his task is also simplified. You see? All right. With that in mind, let's get now to the paid portion, if you'd be so kind. However, let me say this. Before we do that, I do have to let you know about something. One of our friends here on the show, as you guys know how this goes, it's our friends at Mando. Our friends at Mando are hooking you guys up. You guys have heard me talk about my commutes to New York. I got one next week, and how much they can take out of me. And one of the big reasons beyond the time away from family or lost hours of productivity is getting between DC and New York. It's just a lot of time and it's a lot of difficulty. I usually arrive a little sweaty, and depending on the journey, maybe even a little smelly too. But that's why I keep a stick of Mando in my computer bag, and I'll pop it into a bathroom. I'll pop into a bathroom at the train station, sometimes even on the train itself, by the way, to make sure I'm using it so that when I get to the studio, everything is copacetic. Mando is not just normal deodorant. It was created by a doctor who understood how normal body odor was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. It's clinically proven to block odor all day and control BO for up to 72 hours. They've got the solid stick, which is, by the way, what I use. They've got, let's see, spray deodorant, other products. You can choose from a bunch of different great scents, by the way. So I like Mount Fuji or Pro Sport, but there's others you can pick from. The stuff is clinically proven with real science-based evidence, not vibes, to control body odor better than a shower with soap alone. You can find Mando at Walmart, Target, and other retailers nationwide. But for the best deals, go to shopmando.com. You can look on the screen here. Use the code LukeLive. That's all one word, LUKELIVE, to get 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. That's shopmando.com. Code LukeLive. Don't mask it. Mando it. Please support our channel and tell them we sent you. Mando's got you covered. shopmando.com. Use the code LukeLive, LUKELIVE, for 20% off. Oops, wrong one. Sorry. There we go. Okay. With that in mind, let's see what you have for me. MK all day from Saul. That's right. That's what I'm talking about. Hola, Luquito. Can you speak to the damage done by the SCOTUS decision re voting rights? You know what? I've been so fucking insanely busy. Activism more important than ever to ensure people are properly registered and aware. Yes, we're talking about the situation where they gutted part of the Voting Rights Act, one of the pillars of it in Louisiana, which in fact the governor is now calling to suspend the primary as a consequence. But I have not dug into I have not read any of the judge's decisions or their. I read one quote from Kagan. I've not read anything else. It's a perfectly reasonable question, but like there's 24 hours in my day and I just don't have the ability to, I haven't had the ability yet to really buckle down and. All right. Othello, where are the bodies buried? He knows, brother. Tell you, that fool knows. He was telling me some shit. Forgive me for the possibly tacky question here, but who, in your opinion, was the biggest waste of talent you've seen in the UFC? Jesus. My vote is Kevin Holland. I believe he's a champ in another life. See, I don't agree with that. I think he's very good, and I don't think he's maxed out, but I wouldn't call him the biggest waste. Honestly, if Rachmanov can't recover, it might be him. Just by virtue of the injury. I don't think Kane was ever the same after some of his injuries, to be honest with you. That's not the biggest waste because he became champion, but who's some other ones? I mean, again, Cruz was not a waste, but Cruz missed so much time that it's hard to not look at that as something of a mark of what could have been, you know. Luke, I'm convinced the Patriots will part ways with Vrabel. This is going to be a cloud that hangs over their season. What do you think? I don't know, man. He went to a event for season ticket holders and got a standing ovation. I'm like, hasn't this guy been fucking around on his wife for 6 plus years? Everyone's like, you know what, coach? We're just glad you're here. I'm like, I mean, I don't want to know about like a sex scandal per se is nothing that I've ever cared about. I think you guys know that, especially in MMA. I don't give a fuck. It's not my business and I don't care. This one is a little different because it's a media figure getting involved with someone that they cover. And so that, to me, that's the interesting component. But like, you know, just on some dirtbag shit, like he appears to be an enormous dirtbag. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying it. That appears to be the case. But that by itself won't sink you in the NFL, especially if you're a head coach of a winning football team. In fact, I think it'll pave over it, if anything. Now, if they lose, different story. But if they keep winning, I think it'll be fine. I really mean that. I don't think it'll be a big issue at all. Oops, did this one already. If you think of the White House card as a promo for new fans, Gane and Gaethje make for better opponents than Arman and Jones, as those both could be WrestleFests. No? Yes, you could say that. I mean, partly is the card engineered for value. You know, there's not, you know, Movsar's not on that card, right? You look at the card, it's a lot of bangers. Bo's on that card, but you know, he might strike it out, and even if he does get the takedown, he might have some advantages against Dawkins. In other words, it's mostly a lot of people who just want to bang it out in the feet. Clearly, they're designing it in that direction. But I mean, this is the point. It's like, well, dude, we can't make the fights that are going to rule and be better because we're in this strange political context that constrains our options. Because, oh, by the way, we have to make sure at least some Americans win. Like, this is not how to do MMA. Like, the way to do MMA is to just make the best fights you possibly fucking can. And of course, you're filling out a card in Brazil. You're going to put a bunch of Brazilians against maybe some gringos on it. We know the score. But like the top fights, the ones that really, really matter the most, like, just make good fucking fights. Just make the ones that we really want to see. And to that point, Poatan up at heavyweight is not a disaster. Ilia versus Justin is probably not a disaster. I don't know how long it's going to go, but whatever. Certainly not a bad fight. No one's saying that. It's not a bad fight. But to me, it's like, we have to make sure that some Americans are winning and we got to make sure that it's not so much grind fest. It's like, dude, make the best MMA fights you can make. Make the best MMA fights you can make. Fill out the bottom part of the card with some other shit or whatever. Make the best MMA fights you can make. Trying to adjust the product to make it palatable to everyone other than the people who like love MMA with all their heart, to me, just is traditionally not a winning recipe. We'll see. What do you foresee the future striking meta being? I get this question all the time. Let me say something. Number one, I watched that one Samurai, not the whole card, but most of the card. And this was headlined by the rematch between Rodtang and Takeru. Dude, I mean, that was kickboxing. There was some MMA on that card, but that was kickboxing. But it is such a shame that one can't make money. Because I got to tell you, I love their product. I love the way that it looks. I love the way that it's presented. I love that they've got world-class talent through kickboxing on their roster, which is something that nobody else really does. Certainly not to the degree that they do it. I just fucking love it. I think it's great. The problem is they've lost $500 million. Accumulatively. They've lost $500 million. But that was thrilling, dude. It was the one Samurai 1 card. It was so freaking good. So freaking good. So let me just say that outright. In terms of the new meta, one of the things that I've seen is that people are playing with new ways to target and new ideas around targeting. This is not meta so much as it is some level of adaptation around what might be a broader meta. But let me give you an example. I have seen people start to do a thing where rather than teeping to the gut, what they'll do is they'll teep to the back leg, right? And there's setups for it. You have to do it the right way. And it's massively effective. That guy, Yuki Yoza, is real good, not so much on teeps to the back leg, but kicking to the back leg or the post leg in certain cases as a way of differentiating how he leg kicks. I have noticed that people are beginning to play with targeting setups, and it can look the same. Like the teep comes up top, it comes to the gut, and then it can come to and it's not like it's above the knee. But like, what the overall meta would be, I think is a little bit beyond my pay grade. Boxing is killing it this month. Inoue Nakatani is the Japanese Leonard Hearns. We got Benavidez, heavyweight showdowns, Usyk, Bivol, etc. Yeah. And tomorrow we're going to preview. We don't do a whole lot of boxing anymore now that BC's not on the show, but tomorrow we will. Tomorrow we're going to get to Benavidez. Tomorrow we're going to get to Inoue and Nakatani. It's going to be May is going to be a fucking bonkers month. And by the way, I'll have a post-fight show. I might have a watch along, but I'll definitely have a post-fight show for the Australia card on Saturday morning. Good Lord, 300th live chat. Is there anyone fighter whose progress up till now you find particularly surprising in the sense they've greatly overachieved? Ayman Zahabi's a little surprising to me, but his win streak's legit. He's on the White House card, for crying out loud. That's been surprising to me. Yeah, I didn't see that one coming. Can we please get a commentary stream of you and Kyle Kalinske for the Trump birthday special UFC? I'd much rather watch you all than pirate this card. I will definitely have live coverage of that card. I haven't figured out yet how I'm going to divide it between the MMA side and then the politics side, but I'm going to have it. Both. Do you think they might market Islam versus Ian as Dagestan versus Ireland too, even if it's subtle? I think there'll be overtures to it by virtue of the fact that there are echoes of the first one, but I don't think it's going to be, it's not going to have the same kind of friction, or it's not going to be the true inheritance of it. You know what I mean? It would have to be like Connor's guy, and Ian's not really Connor's guy. Did Trump practically ordering Dana to add Derek Lewis to the White House card expose that Dana's alpha persona is just performance? Every alpha persona is performance. He folded instantly, no pushback. I don't know, but there's no such thing as alpha in the human realm. And so to the extent that anyone is behaving that way, it is by definition performative. If you had to vote for a standard Democrat like Hakeem Jeffries or Tucker Carlson, Jesus, I think I would just fucking kill myself. I mean, God, what a miserable choice. Oh my God. I would vote third party. No, I couldn't. I'd vote third party. Hey, Luke, can you explain what the Rodtang versus one thing is? What exactly are they suing him for? Basically, there's a back and forth, and I guess they're going to drop it now, but they only filed a lawsuit in Thailand, but they were apparently going to do it in Japan and in Singapore as well, which is a whole thing. But the idea was that he had claimed that there was a dispute over the contract and that his contract was up, and one was saying, well, no, we have matching rights. And then he kind of insinuated that if there's documentation to that, then they forged it. And so they're suing him for what they are alleging is that he is falsely claiming that. That's where it comes from. Same thing about Belal. We'll skip that one since we already did it earlier. Bjorn says, will Stephen Miller's influence survive beyond Trump? No. Well, I don't know if it's his influence as part of, you mean like his direct influence? No. With the rise of people like Fuentes, Tucker, Owens, his pernicious influence will live on. Can I just say one note? It's the smallest note in the world, and it's a very LT kind of note, but I have to say it. The amount of my fellow whites who pronounce Fuentes. Have you guys heard this? They'll be like, yeah, Nick Fuentes. I don't like him. He's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great. Can you please pronounce his name correctly? Like Tess, as in Tesla. Fuentes. It's not Tays. I don't, it's not Fuentes. You know what I mean? It's Fuentes. Fuentes. N-Tess. 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 It's the same thing. Anyway, with the rise of people like Fuentes, Tucker, and Owens, they are all slightly different. His pernicious influence will live on. He is part of a broader movement himself. It's not like Stephen Miller didn't create Fuentes or Tucker or Candace Owens. And again, there's substantive differences between them, but it's not his influence. It's his espousal of these things in the government. That's his influence. But they're not taking top-down direction from Stephen Miller. This is This is the problem. It's organically coming up from underneath. I'll leave the Haggerty Yuki Yosa to somebody else, but you're looking for a Takeru, and Rodtang breakdown. This was not, dude, it was crazy to me. I don't know if something was wrong with Rodtang. I mean, getting sideways with one, it seemed to have messed him up, or he wasn't training, or some other. He didn't look unhealthy or anything like that. But, he was able to put Takeru away in 80 seconds in their first fight, and he would be landing kind of big punches at times on Takeru, and Takeru would just smile at him. Like he had a fucking psycho look on his face the whole time and was just eating his punches. And then Takeru would counter him, and that's when he would drop him with that left hook. He kept dropping him with the left hook over and over. So he dropped him 2 times in round 2 and then 2 times in round 5. And that fourth time sealed the deal. But the long story short is they kind of traded leg kicks. First round, I thought Rodtang won. Takeru drops him twice in that second round, just kind of trading with him, backing him up to the ropes. That was a big part too. Third round, I thought was pretty measured from Rodtang. Fourth, kind of a similar thing. And then in the fifth, Takeru just same kind of thing, backs him up, exchanges with him in the pocket, left hook lands, and he just kind of closed the show from there. So like Rodtang did well because he was more active. Rodtang would just touch, jab, I'm moving off, leg kick, jab. He was throwing jab and then left hooks, or left hook to the upstairs and left hook to the liver. He was doing a lot of that. He was winning rounds when he wasn't getting dropped if he could like touch and move, because he was just kind of like, playing tag and then numerically just landing more often. Takeru was kind of just wearing it and then marching him down. Again, it was a psycho-ass performance, like good one, but like a psycho performance from Takeru. So that was how he basically did it, and it was electric. With Gable Steveson being announced to debut International Fight Week and Conor McGregor being heavily rumored to be the main event, what is your level of concern? God. For non-consenting women in the Las Vegas area. Yeah, that card that I saw someone joking on Twitter that the main card is something like 30% rapist or something like that. I mean, there was their comment, not mine. But yeah, man. It doesn't really matter what you've done, to be honest with you. Like, it's weird, right? Because Greg Hardy comes to the sport and everyone's like, yeah, fuck this woman beater. And it's like, yeah, but there's like a bunch of other woman beaters on this roster and y'all don't have that energy for them. So like, I don't understand the difference. And it's like, and the other part too is I've seen people be like, oh yeah, because Conor really showed, he may have lost at trial, but he showed he was telling the truth. And I'm like, dude, I paid attention to that trial. He got fucking annihilated in it. Not only did he get annihilated in the standard trial, both on the evidentiary grounds, explanatory grounds, witness grounds, jury grounds, judging grounds. If you actually listen to what the comments the judges made and some of the decisions that they made during the course of that trial, like Conor lost at every fucking turn, basically, on this one. Then he tries to have the appeal sent through, and that blows up in his face so dramatically. They have to basically withdraw on everything but procedural grounds. They have to withdraw on every evidentiary ground that they had, because the people who he was going to trot out that day were just fabricating it all, it turned out, or at least appear to be fabricating it all. What is the argument that he came across looking good here? Like, it's a very, you just have to have no belief in the weight of evidentiary material to come to that conclusion. It's not possible. But like, this is MMA now. That's why I keep saying to everyone, man, this is MMA now. This is not the MMA I grew up with. The MMA I grew up with was, we are trying to cast as wide a net as possible, and we're trying to invite all groups to enjoy it as a consequence. That's not the pitch. The pitch is, we're fucking, this is just unvarnished reality for good or for worse, and fucking deal or don't. Like, that's the pitch now. You get paid $10,000 for each rep of an exercise, but the weight is your body weight. What exercise are you choosing, and how many reps are you doing? Probably bench press. Yeah, probably bench press. I haven't benched on a barbell. I couldn't remember the last time I benched on a barbell, so I don't know how many I could do. But the last time I did it, I was able to get 275 for 5 without much issue. So, and I wasn't max. I was just trying to see if I could, I had to push a little bit on the 5th, but it wasn't very hard. But that was a while ago. So I don't know, but I mean, let's just assume that's a baseline. So maybe I'd have 50K coming my way, Will you be covering the Blood for Blood event next week? It seems like a match made in heaven for your personal interest in metal and fighting. I don't even know what that is, brother. I don't even know what that is. Luke, I'm training for an Ironman race. Any tips? Train hard. What the hell would I know about Ironman racing? I know nothing. LT, what's your personal position on the Second Amendment and gun rights, if you don't mind me asking? Yeah, I've read some interesting scholarship on it. I think I'm at the point now. This is not, as things change in the world, your position should change maybe to a degree, depending. I think what I would say is, I don't think there's really any way to get rid of the number of guns that we have and the the amount of judicial interpretation, whether you agree with it or not, is so overwhelming in favor of expanding access to guns. And because it is enshrined in the Constitution, or at least the Bill of Rights anyway, that there's really like, there's different methods of gun control. There's different things you can do, but like confiscation doesn't seem, that's not a thing to me anymore. Maybe that was some dream in the early 90s or something, or late 80s or something, but it's not relevant anymore. Instead, there are, however, I think, all kinds of different restrictions you can place on, ammunition types, gun types, access to firearms with, depending on your criminal record or activity. There's different ways of creating different insurance arrangements to help protect against risk. There's just a variety of different interventions that you could take up that can minimize, to an extent anyway, gun death, gun exposure, gun violence. And I think that's really your best option at this point. People make this argument like, oh, it's to protect yourself from the government. And there can be certainly instances of this. You might have seen, for example, on the left, the Black Panthers who were doing this around, the time of the ICE raids. And they're like, no one's going to fuck with us. And it's like, well, dude, here's the thing. Like that might be true to an extent. It can be, it can be helpful in a variety of contexts. That's true. But if they want to take your shit, they're gonna. Like, if they want to win a battle with you, they're gonna. This idea that like we're to create armament such that you can repel government forces at your, the entrance to your cul-de-sac, that's not a real thing. I saw Ruby Ridge, I saw Waco. They'll just set your ass on fire or kill you. Like they'll get what they want. So like, to me, that's not really a compelling argument. It's just that now, because like Japan's constitution does not enshrine this at all, and so therefore gun ownership is so heavily controlled there. But we've done the opposite. Do we not have any bans on it, we've got a right to it in some capacity, and again, depending on legal interpretation, written into the heart of the freedoms that the country is supposed to be able to provide for you. I don't know how you can solve a problem of volume and scale when that is consecrated in our laws. Have you kept up with Real Madrid lately? Yes, some. And have their ineptitude made you tune out? Yes. How do you feel about them since Mbappe came in? How do you see their future? I mean, I think him and Vinny have worked out a little bit better than I thought from what I've seen. But the way that Xabi flamed out was very surprising to me. I guess it shouldn't have been, but it was. And, Arbeloa is whatever. I don't know what to say about him. I mean, maybe they'll get Mourinho, maybe they won't. But that they've got an enormous amount of talent, although they had some injuries too. But the reality is, man, like everything about Real Madrid is, if you don't, I mean, this is true for obviously most clubs, but it's like hyper true for like Real Madrid. If you don't have the right manager, dude, it's not going to work. Like, you have to have somebody who doesn't have to be a tactical genius, but does have to know how to manage a locker room, has to have their support, has to have some sense of offensive identity, and then you kind of got to let them do what they do. And they've just not had that, Thoughts on the IDM podcast? Oh yes, this is the Othello's podcast. You think I listen to that bullshit? What do you think of Dave Smith's Of the World? Hard to believe someone goes from being duped by Trump again to articulate human rights advocate in year one. So Dave Smith has come up a lot more on my radar. I was only familiar with him. I mean, I've hosted a show with him, and he was quite friendly, and I enjoyed it a lot. But it was over Israel stuff, which I thought he was like really great on. And then more recently, I've seen he's got beef with Kyle Kalinske, which I'm not sure what the origin of that is. Saw him, I think, even going back and forth with Hassan Piker. I'm not sure. I've not paid close attention to that. So I don't know about the sum total of his views. I mean, yes, anybody who went back to Trump for his second time, and thought that would be a good idea. That's a very hard thing to look past. However, he's been, to me, so good on some other issues that I'm absolutely certainly willing to, take a step back and say, hey, what does he believe about the world? Because I couldn't answer that forthrightly. I mean, I know he's nominally libertarian, but how that actually intersects with different policies can vary person to person. So from what I have seen, it seems like there should be a lot more like some of it is surprising to me. But it's hard again, it's hard. It's very, very difficult for me to understand how someone could look at Trump in the first term and be like, we need this with less guardrails. That's a very difficult thing for me to understand. Saw your video on BJJ and MMA. Do you think JITS players could benefit from working with someone like Eric Paulson based on his... Well, dude, okay. I'm glad you brought this up. Based on his MMA fighting, catch wrestling, and BJJ experience, yes. Thinking more... There you go. You took the words right out of my mouth. Thinking more recently of his work with the Ruotolo brothers. Catch wrestling to me doesn't have as many competitors, and it isn't necessarily as developed as jiu-jitsu has like really evolved, because there's been just such enthusiasm for it within the MMA community, within the combat sports community. It's just grown a lot. It's got a bigger profile. So it's really, really developed over time. And I'm not an expert on catch wrestling, but it doesn't seem to me to have the same level of development for a lot of those reasons. But it is better suited for MMA than jiu-jitsu is. It's just got a lot of the same precepts that go into it. It's got a lot of pain submissions too, but it's just real good about, having symmetry between the things that it incentivizes, as well as, and how that lines up with MMA. So I don't know how much the pain submissions are valuable, or like, weird guard passes, which is a lot of what like sometimes Paulson can show, but he's got a wealth of information. And I don't think the Ruotolo's success is accidental, in part because they've got great, phenomenal modern jiu-jitsu, but being with Paulson is going to be hugely beneficial. Yes, I think a lot of people could benefit from training with Paulson, not for everything that he does, but for some of the core things he could get right, for sure. What are you reading right now? I am reading Private Equity and the Death of the American Dream. Megan Greenwell, you might note, is the former editor of Deadspin before they completely sold off everything and became like a zombified version of themselves. And when it closed down and when private equity took it over, she thought like there'd be this revitalization process, because like, why would you buy an asset to watch it decline? But that's not what happened. They bought it and they did nothing with it, and it declined, and then they sold it basically for parts and its name anyway. And she couldn't understand, like, how could they make money doing that? And then, so this book is an investigation of like how private equity works. How is it possible? Yeah, sometimes they can flip stuff. That's true. That also works. But it can also be the case they can just buy stuff, destroy it, and still make money. And again, like, imagine if you bought a car and then took a sledgehammer to it. You're not making money doing this. And yet private equity has found ways to do that. And this book is an investigation of how that happens. Yeah. Why is pro wrestling, boxing, and MMA media siloed? They're all threatened by TKO monopoly and yet stay isolated. Would you host a roundtable discussion with Zeteo, Meltzer, and Brandon Thurston? I don't know who Brandon Thurston is, but I'm always for discussion. It's just that, like, dude, if you're like, there's people who are into all three, but there's people who are into pro wrestling who don't give a fuck about boxing. And a lot of MMA fans also don't give a fuck about boxing. And hello, boxing fans, for the most part, don't give a fuck about MMA. That's why they're siloed. I've been watching Charles, I'm assuming Oliveira's fights back recently, and noticed how much his wrestling improved. Is wrestling and BJJ the only viable way to make BJJ effective in higher ranks? To me, you have to have pinning, passing, and back attacks. If their back is on the mat, you have to be able to pin them there. If they're on their base, you have to have some kind of ride on top, as well as the ability to transition to the back. And then once you're at the back, the ability to hold it and mature attacks there. So to me, it's that. It's the pinning, passing, rides, and back control. Those are the pillars to me of good jiu-jitsu in those contexts you're describing. Congrats on 300. Excited for the next 300. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Ross, welcome to the party. LT, I am currently on my way to have lunch with a fellow donk out in the Bay Area. Donks in the wild. LT, your content and Substack are the direct line that brought us tip to tip. Thank you, my friend. Enjoy the lunch. Advice on becoming an MMA content creator. Fucking don't. this sport's in trouble. Don't. Unless it's like a side thing for just fun and maybe a little bit of cash, don't. I don't have great. I'm really not sure about this sport's future. I'm being dead serious with you. Not imminently, but I wouldn't want to plan my future around it. I'll be that. I'll say that. Luke, the guy who came in second in the world record marathon got sub 2 hours, and it was his debut marathon. Holy fucking shit. That's crazy. That's crazy. If the White House card goes extremely well, do you see a chance it boosts Trump's image again? Sure. I can't rule out the possibility. I think it could give him a short-term boost. Why else do you think they're fucking doing it? I mean, yes, it's to give the UFC a lot of pat on the back too, but why else do you think they're doing it? So he would look bad? The whole idea is to make him look good. That's the whole, or at least a key. That's the key. Every time he goes to a UFC event, that's what they're trying to do. But the problem is that's not going to open up the Strait of Hormuz. It's not going to keep regional hospitals open. It's not going to prevent people who have no connection to any nation in Africa from ICE trafficking them there. It's not going to put money in your bank account. It's not going to fix grocery prices or, as I mentioned, gas prices or anything else in between. It's not going to do any of those things. So, like, there could be a temporary boost, but the material reality of the United States as it's fucking burning alive is probably going to make any kind of boost short and unsustained. How much is your cut for the merch you sell? Interested in a bigger cut? I'm always interested in a bigger cut. Luke, what are your thoughts on peptides and their increased use among the general population? It seems like everyone and their mother is pinning themselves with little self-education. I tried a little bit, actually. Yes. Now, I only ended up taking it for 2 weeks, and I had to get off of it because I am on blood pressure medicine. And because of the blood pressure medicine, the doctor was like, let's just see how your body adapts to this. So, but you can buy you can buy, I had a friend hit me to it. You can just buy this shit off the internet, and the quality is, I don't know. But like, here's the problem. The shit works. Like, I'm not saying it's a good idea to go buy Chinese fucking laboratory made peptides. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is if you do, there's a good chance they'll work, because everyone I know who's purchased them has had phenomenal results. I don't know how you're supposed to control for that. If everyone on the internet is easy to buy, relatively easy to administer, and the shit works, yeah, it might be bad for you, or maybe it doesn't work like, a perfectly well-made compound, but it's good enough. And, there has to be some regulation on it. Otherwise, it's just going to be just more of this. Thoughts on Michael Tracy trying to fight Jim Acosta and every other woman on earth, it turns out. What's going on with Michael Tracy? Was he always this crazy? He had, again, he's a professional contrarian. And the thing about professional contrarians are they're going to be wrong a lot, but then there's going to be times like when they're right, they're going to be really right. He's kind of banking himself on the idea that there's really nothing to the Epstein files, or very little anyway. And that there's not this vast ring of, not that there weren't like ne'er-do-wells in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit, but this idea that like he was a pedophilic trafficker of, children or, young women even. He just doesn't think there's an evidentiary basis for it. I don't even know what to say about that. But he's a weird dude. Professional contrarians are weird dudes. And he tried to fight the Miami-based reporter Julie Brown at the Substack party, apparently. I don't know. He's a fucking weird-ass dude, man. I'm not sure what to say about him. Visit in D.C. from New Zealand in November. Top 3 things to do. Top 3? Cruise the Potomac. Monuments at night, not during the day, at night. Get a cocktail at the roof of the W Hotel. There you go. Thoughts on the Iran Lego vids, the MASH one slaps. They're unbelievably good. They're quite good. They're part of warfare is information warfare. And the Iranians are kicking our ass when it comes to information warfare by virtue of these methods that they're deploying, these Lego movies or even adjacent interests related to the Iranian regime. They've been very, very good at setting tones and very good about hitting the hitting the USA where it hurts the most. And they've just been very clever, timely, sharp, incisive. funny to a degree. They're just really clever information warfare. Have you read Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman? I have not. Highly recommended. Duly noted. Embarrassing Spanish story. I accidentally asked for manzana con huevos instead of uva in Yucatan. So uva is like a berried fruit. You asked for manzana con huevos. So this, for folks who don't know what this means, he asked for apples with eggs instead of uva in Yucatan last week at a fruit stand. My Mexican wife laughed at the rest of the day learning. I've got two of them. One time I was in a place in Bogota called Pan Paja. It's like which means like bread now, sort of bread now here. It's hard to explain, but anyway, I tried to order in there and I fucked it up so badly that someone else had to come and like rescue me in the middle of the order. And the lady who was taking out the trash was laughing at my Spanish. Like when I say laughing at my Spanish, I mean as if Dave Chappelle had just hit a home run on the like prime Richard Pryor was doing stand up, and you just was like it was like gut bustingly funny. The other one was very early into my Spanish speaking days. We're talking like this is years and years and years ago, like maybe when I first started dating my wife or something. And I was going to Starbucks and I asked her what she wanted, and she texted me she wanted a sorpresa. And this is the opposite, but I didn't know that's sorpresa is Spanish for surprise. So she was saying, surprise me. And I didn't know that's what she meant. I didn't know sorpresa was surprise. And so I went to Starbucks and I was like, yeah, do you have sorpresas like with, I don't know, with foam or whatever? And they were like looking at their menu because they're like, we don't know what a sorpresa, we don't have that. Like we got macchiatos, we've got, I don't know, whatever the fuck they were serving at the time. And I was like, but you don't have like maybe it's like ice cream? And they're like, no, that's not called a sorpresa. And so I left being like, I was like, man, they didn't have shit. And then I went home to my wife or girlfriend at the time anyway. And I was like, yo, I tried to get you a sorpresa. They didn't even hear about that. And she was like, you fucking idiot. Yeah, no wonder they didn't hear of it. Dude, you're asking them like, do they have surprises for you in Spanish? Yeah, I bet they didn't. You fucking moron, Thoughts? Oh yeah, we did this one already. Have you? We did this one too. Am I wrong to believe all of Trump's assassination attempts seem to be staged? Here's the thing. I'm not above the idea that they are. I think in order to prove a claim like that, you need a high evidentiary bar to clear. And to my knowledge, there isn't one, at least not yet. But like, would it surprise me if it was true? No, I don't put it past them at all. If you have the capacity to, you should have a gander at the horrors happening in Africa, Sudan, Maui, etc. That and Ukraine, Palestine really make you appreciate how good we have it in the West. Well, yeah, the UAE had to quit their funding of the RSF in Sudan. And that ended up being like a lifeline for the people down there because they were just hacking them and murdering them to death. I mean, the Gaza horror is so unique because it was one population controlling another one and everything was live streamed to you. Again, I'm not saying it's the worst moral atrocity of my lifetime. There might have been other ones. The Hutus and the Tutsis, that's who it was, from Rwanda. But again, to the extent that I was exposed to one, I've never seen anything like Gaza. I don't know what to make of this claim. Luke, I just Googled what percentage of the world's population is Jewish. Google says 0.2%. That's wild, right? So much commotion from a small population. Yeah, I'm not going to do Jewish commentary on this. I'll do Israeli commentary or the government of Israel or the IDF. I'm not particularly interested in claims about policing Jewish life. I don't have any interest in that whatsoever. Is it Berenstein Bears or Berenstain Bears? I think it's Berenstein, but I don't know. Berenstain. Well, that's a good question. Well, can't you just Google that shit? I don't know. I'm Irish. Just got back from New York. Going over, we were the only people in Dublin Airport, U.S. immigration. I've never seen it so empty. Have you seen tourism drop over there or just a one-off for me that day, bro? So I just had my wife just came back. She's an American citizen. Just came back from Australia, and my mother-in-law came here and some other family as well. And they all came from different airports at different times. And I was like, oh yeah, how was immigration? Because you just never know. And for American citizens, it turns out it's mostly just, for the most part, from what I understand, totally fine, right? It's where if you're not an American citizen, that's where it starts to get dicey. But anyway, point I'm trying to make is they were like, dude, there was no line, nothing. It's this early morning, middle of the day, late at night, DC, LA, Miami, didn't matter. They're like, there's nothing. They've destroyed tourism to this country. I don't know what the World Cup is going to be like, y'all. I really don't. I really, really don't. Once again, you cannot go to war with your own immigrant population without causing significant national self-harm. It cannot be done. And we have done it. And not just this, there's a lot more that we've done, but this is a pretty key, obvious indicator. In some senses, if you don't get sent to a gulag in El Salvador, now's a good time to come to the United States in terms of getting through customs, because there won't be that many people on your flight. I was reminded about the stories about Secret Service prostitution malfeasance, and I've been wondering if it might not be an indication of deep-seated rot from the top. All I know is I had an officer who was in the Marine Corps that I was under one time, who was part of the uniformed Secret Service, so not the ones that were plainclothes, but there's a uniformed version of them. And he was an asshole and an idiot. So if the Secret Service is comprised of people like him, we're in trouble. Would you ever bring on a smaller creator? Kennedy Louise is an MMA creator interviewer who purposely cultivates a female audience. Good luck with that. I'm a bit biased, but I think having her perspective on here could be cool. Sure, I'm always happy to talk to any kind of different person within the MMA community. But it's like, dude, what is everyone's plan to get young women to watch the sport when you've got Sean Strickland being like, yeah, those goat effers, I'm going to shoot them. It's like, let me ask a question to the chuds in the chat. Serious one. Do you think that makes MMA more popular? Do you think that? You might. I'm not saying you don't, or maybe you don't. I don't know. But I want to be very clear. You have to be a brain damaged fucking moron to think that. It is very instructive to have lived through MMA when it was making a different pitch, because a different pitch comes with different language. When the pitch was, this is something for everybody, and we can prove it to you, and especially when Rousey comes over in 2014, and there are young girls showing up to UFC fights to see her and sometimes other women, because you're cultivating now a different audience, because you're trying to make it as wide a tent as you possibly can. That worked. So let me see if I understand this. If you actually seek that end and you have language around it and then the resources to make it work, it is true that messaging in that direction works. So then it has to also be true that messaging in the opposite direction, where it's not just about young women per se, this will be, appealing to some men, but, not appealing to others. But certainly like this kind of aggro machismo environment filled with people who have not read a book since it was mandated in 5th grade, that's going to have the same, you do realize that is going to have the same kind of repellent effect. I made this point in one of my on my politics channel about the UFC and Trump. Namely, it's like I just don't think the UFC under TKO. I mean, maybe they do and they just don't care. But part of me just thinks that they haven't realized what they've done. Like when you make a pitch like, hey, this event is for everybody, I don't understand what the pitch is. The people inside of the sport, like me, there are some that are left. Most of them have been pushed out or left on their own volition. Okay. Then there are people within the sport itself who, they're just degenerates who just want to watch fights. Yeah, fine, whatever, cool, no problem. And then there's people like, they're trying to get the casual fans. But the problem is, even if you capture casual fans with this White House card, let's say it does really big numbers, eventually they're going to get exposed to, 2 weeks later, fighters on the roster calling each other anti-gay slurs and all this other shit. Like this is just now the rot of the culture that comes with this broader political embrace of these kinds of people and these kinds of ideas and these kinds of languages that are associated with them as well. Like it's not going to work. You can't grow the tent when this is what is inside of it. You can grow more of that kind of person being attracted to it. That's true. But that's going to be, relatively speaking, a smaller population than the wider berth you could have if it was more targeted to wider audiences, like legitimately wider audiences, not more white guys who spend too much time outside of the sun. if I can't convince you that kind, like the ideas that underpin that are just low IQ dipshittery because you think it's cool to just say outrageous things, okay, well then I don't know what to say to you. And maybe you don't care if the sport's any more popular, right? Maybe, hey, listen, as long as they just keep putting on fights, I don't even care if they're good. I just want to watch and gamble on them or whatever. All right, well, that's one kind of an existence. But just to be very clear, I have watched the opposite put in place, and I saw the good consequences that yielded. If we're doing the opposite of that now, you should expect the opposite kinds of consequences to now be in play. And if they don't matter to you, they don't matter to you, but they might matter to some others. LT, how similar are the Islam Gary and Hamzat Sean fights? Two unbeatables taking on volume strikers. No. So, I mean, there are some broad details about that when, I grant, but in the sense of Gary is going to be much more light on his feet. He might be on the back foot, but he's going to be, harder to pull down. He's got good takedown defense against the fence. Islam is, I think, a little bit more of a dual threat, and a little bit more of a patient threat. We'll see. Actually, we'll see how Hamzat fights, but to this point, he's been a little bit more of that. So there are some similarities between them, to be sure, but the kind of athletic profile and the way in which that affects his footwork and whatnot kind of makes Gary, pretty different in some important respects. Educate yourself in CBT-I. There's plenty of great channels out there that'll help you understand your issues with insomnia is behavioral, not physical. Can I just have drugs that put me to sleep? I don't really care about anything else. Have you seen the news articles about the approval of vehicle kill switches tied to sensors that monitor if you're fit to drive? Yes. Are we headed for an Orwellian surveillance state? Yes. Yes. You might not be in jail if you're watching this right now. I hope you understand we don't live in a free country anymore. Moderately free, somewhat free, maybe in certain respects still mostly, but not the way we were. Our elected leaders are trying to pass non-binding resolutions about condemning Hassan Piker. And then the first labor bill that this Congress took up in 2026 was the fucking TKO Ali Destruction Act. That's the first labor bill they took up. Let me ask you something. Do you think that's the most pressing labor issue in front of the American people today? I do not. I do not think that's the most important one. I do not think stripping out the ability for promoters to be bound by coercive contracts, or sorry, to be able to use coercive contracts, I should say, is the most important thing. I would think that there's actually other labor issues important. I would think that getting out in front of AI regulation, you see in China that that there are restrictions on what kinds of layoffs can happen at companies, but even with AI development, like you're just not allowed to, we've got more AI development, we can just lay off people. Like apparently some of those, I'm not here to say that everything is great in China, but just sort of pointing out, at least they've got some sense about putting some guardrails on this emerging and frankly dangerous technology. These fucking people, and surely you can agree, bipartisan manner, they are asleep at the fucking wheel. They are asleep at the fucking wheel. If ever there was one. And we, ladies and gentlemen, like, dude, nothing, I cannot tell you this. I am so certain of it. Absolutely nothing will get better until it gets remarkably worse. That's it. That's it. If they don't get that fucking, I mean, already, even if the straight open today, we'd still have an enormous amount of oil and price shocks coming our way. To say nothing of now UAE leaving OPEC and what that's going to do with flooding the market with, a bunch of oil that they want to get out. Like the volatility that will put in there. Like, dude, I'm telling you, I couldn't be more certain if I tried. And you should read media that talks to the Iranian government. You could say, they're bluffing. Fine, they're bluffing. But what are they saying? They think they hold the cards. They think that they can withstand most of the economic shocks that might come their way. If they feel like they're going to be led back into battle, they've threatened to cut undersea internet cables to go after refineries and various key parts of energy infrastructure back to UAE as well as Saudi Arabia and other key parts of Israel too. Like really hammering them this time. Like they think that they have the cards, and I honestly think that they're probably right. They're probably going to start charging even when the strait opens, charging tolls as a way to circumvent the sanctions that have been put on them if they don't get dropped altogether anyway. Like, dude, it is. I don't know how bad it's going to be by the time the White House thing happens or even the midterms. But by the end of this year, or certainly the beginning of the next one, you're going to be feeling this a whole lot more. There's no way to get out of this. These people don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're bad at governing. They're legitimately, look at them. They are bad at governing. And then the bipartisan support on the legislative side of the branch is unconscionable, in my opinion. Yeah, we're fucked, bro. Do you think Almeida's demise in MMA comes from the lack of steroid use and him having a glass chin? Not taking damage well is part of it. I don't know if I can speculate on the former. I remember back where Leandro Lo, Almeida Buchecha, and Gordon Ryan were the top 3 grapplers in the world, and then they fucking killed Leandro in a club. It's insane how people can believe Hamzat would beat Snyder or Bo in RAF. This is wrestling. People don't seem to understand the difference between pure wrestling and MMA wrestling. Yes, they don't. But that's also not a surprise, right? Because they're always like, can Conor beat Mayweather? We might have a shot, It's like, no, an MMA fighter is probably not going to beat a boxer in boxing. That's even more volatile. I mean, yes, could lightning strike and something happen? Sure, but it's all pretty unlikely, right? I get mad that government infrastructure underutilizes advancements in tech. For example, the internet should have made electoral college obsolete. I don't know if I understand the argument, though. How would you like to see tech apply to improve democratic efficacy? I don't know. I don't think that democratic efficacy, I think it could be impacted in more meaningful ways through tech, but honestly, of all the ways in which we could, through low-hanging fruit, improve it, tech would probably be last on that list for me. Congrats on 300 episodes. Thank you. Good to see that. Glad to see that you have lasted much longer than Live Golf. How much longer do you think the Saudis got? Now, here's the thing about TKO. They're going to get the bill passed. Everyone knows that, right? Like the Ali Destruction Act is going to become law. Okay. How long? Okay. The way I would say it is this. I don't think anything can derail TKO, even if Saudi pulls out of boxing. But I will say that if there is one thing that could derail TKO, it is Saudi pulling out of boxing. I think they're still going to have their pick of the litter ultimately, by virtue of the way in which their business is going to be constructed with the legal mechanisms that we all now know and understand. But if there is one thing that could throw a wrench into their plans, it would be that. Congrats on 300. Thank you. Been a fan since I worked at Sherdog. Oh, great. Question. What is the most harmless yet retrospectively wasteful habit, hobby, or pursuit you now regret the amount of time it captured? I'd say for me, gi jiu-jitsu versus no gi BJJ was pretty high. Harmless yet retrospectively wasteful habit. Reading on a Kindle. I could never quite put my finger on what the difference would be between reading on a Kindle and then reading on a hardcover book. And it always felt to me like I could read on the Kindle faster. So I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. Because, taking a book everywhere is like a hardback book is kind of hard. But like you can put a Kindle, some of the Kindles in like the size, okay, I can palm a basketball. But like you can fit in the palm of your hand. Like it's got a smaller profile, right? And so I thought, I'll just take this everywhere. So you're sitting outside at a cafe, I'll read 10 pages and then you're on your way. And then that's how you can read a bunch of books. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. But then I realized over time, I was like, I don't remember what I read that well. And then more recently, studies have shown that reading digitally does not have the same imprint as it does when reading on a physical book or a physical piece of paper. Reading on a physical piece of paper tends to have a more imprinting nature on your brain and your memory than digitally kind of scanning a screen. And I don't quite understand what the scientific explanation for that is, but there's now some emerging research that shows that to be the case. And that anecdotally totally matches my experience. So for me, like I read a bunch of books on the Kindle and I'm like, do I need to reread these things on the physical one? Because I don't know. There's a bunch I don't remember. Could the nearly finalized Zuffa boxing bill still pass if Trump were assassinated? Yes. Would Vance support the revised Ali Act in your opinion? Whether it would have the same legislative priority or something. If Trump were to be assassinated, I mean, again, God forbid, but like, the world would be turned upside down. I don't know what that would do to the legislative priority of it, but like, there's no way Vance would like veto it. You know. Luke recently watched Predator Badlands. Good movie. I told y'all, donks. I love that movie. It's surprisingly very, very good. The iteration on that was it caught me by surprise. I didn't think they were going to pull it off, and they did. MK by day, LT by night. Thank you all day. Hamzat, congrats on 300 chats. Do you have any favorite memories specific to the live chat? Oh, dude, I've had so many good ones. I wouldn't even know where to start with this one. You know, I've had funny ones where I told the story about the lady fight I saw on the DC Metro one time in the parking lot of near Congress Heights. You know, I've had vulnerable moments like last year when I cried on air. I've had, you know, I've had certain things I've said that I know fighters have taken to heart in terms of, or even other people that they bring up to me years later. You know, I remember when you said this, like the swinging the axe thing tend to have gotten people's attention. I've said stupid shit too. You know, I've said a lot of things that after the fact proven to be totally wrong. I welcome all of it. I welcome all of it. Why are people debating one samurai was rigged rather than fighters being able to learn from previous mistakes and game plan around the opponent? It's a good question, and I think I have an answer. One, there's just a lot of fuckery in Japanese combat sports, which is not an unfair thing to observe, number one. But more to the point, it's because Rodtang looked like shit. I mean, again, he was winning rounds where he was... when Takeru was just kind of like, you know, marching him down. He was still touching and going, but like he couldn't hurt Takeru. You know what I mean? In the first fight, he hurt him easily. And that's also partly to do with Takeru. It just seemed a little weird that Rodtang was like the, you know, ineffectual. It was a bizarre kind of performance in that sense. Imagine a world that Cleary scored round 5 for Henry versus Aljo. 55% score the fight for Aljo, but 93% on MMA decisions. Round 5 for Triple C. He should have won the split. Genuinely pisses me off. Plus, I hate both guys. I mean, you're only close in horseshoes, though. I know what you mean, but like that's fight sports. Yes, it would have been different. It would have been hugely redemptive for him to come back and get that win, but he would have lost thereafter. I mean, he was fading, right? Luke, sorry, I had to join the chat late. This Sean Strickland shooting Hamzat is ridiculous. Why is the UFC not putting their foot down? Where's Cash Patel? This is I don't know what to tell y'all. This is MMA now. This is MMA now. Like, oh, we're the free speech organization. Really? Is that why you penalize fighters when they say they want a bonus after they win? Because you're committed to the freedom of expression? You know what I mean? Or to say nothing of, you know, the criticism of the business model or other things that they don't like. Like it's obvious that you're allowed to say this is their speech policy. This is the fruit that it bears. The fruit that it bears is, hey, do you want to say reckless, outrageous, racist, like super anti-gay, horrible, anti-Semitic, whatever tickles your fancy? Do you want to say that? Open door fucking policy, bro. Open door policy. Now, you can't ask us for more money on the mic. If you win, we will make sure that we punish you for that, and you know, be very careful about what things you say in the media. We'll punish you for that too. But you know, if you want to say slurs, brother, you came to the right place. This is what it is now. This is what it is. Incentives drive behavior. It's as simple as that. They can say whatever they want about being a free speech organization. I think that I have it on good authority that there are people with inside UFC who are horrified by Strickland's behavior. I want to be clear about that too. It doesn't matter. None of that shit matters. None of that matters at all. Oh, we're personally horrified. It doesn't matter. You give oxygen to this. This is what you promote. This is what your rules naturally lead to. They naturally lead to a place where the only kind of extreme they can go to is these kinds of extremes. And these kinds of extremes are good for getting attention in an economy where it doesn't matter if it's good attention or bad attention. As long as it's attention, the incentives drive the behavior. This is MMA now. This is what we are. This is who we are. Oh, that's not me. I don't stand for that. Sorry. I'm implicated too. If you watch this shit and you enjoy this shit and you tolerate this, you are implicated in it too. Me too. Me too. This is MMA now. Oh, MMA is something else, and this is like a bad version. Nope. Nope. That is MMA. That's actually, I would argue, the truest expression of MMA. Currently, anyway. This is the culture we have built. These are the things that we promote. These are the values that we share. This is us. This is us. That's why I don't even bother fighting it anymore. Like, you can get out there and be like, I am completely horrified. Who's going to listen to you inside MMA? Do you think there's a constituency within MMA to listen to those complaints? Who would it be? Oh, there's a quiet minority of fans who don't like it. Nah. No, there's not. There's a small amount. Yes, there's a small amount of people who are horrified by it but still watch it. That's true. But in general, no. Most of it is now just kind of tolerated and even accepted to a degree. And there might be people gnashing their teeth. There's not many of them. This is what MMA is. This is what it has become. And it didn't have to be this way. This was a choice. So, congrats. Like, I thought it made more sense to have a sport that was so wide that you would get young, poor, rich, old, black, white, tall, short, you name it, male, female, whatever, gay, straight, whatever. I thought to me, it made sense. And I saw that work. I watched the sport do it, and I watched it work. And they just decided to abandon all that. So this is what we are now. We are this. So a lot of people want to be like, oh, Strickland is an extremist and blah, blah, blah. Strickland is MMA. This is what we are. LT, we had our first daughter this week. Congratulations. How has becoming a girl dad changed your perspective, if at all, on women, and any specific advice? It never occurred to me how predatory the world was towards women until I was tasked with thinking about how I'm going to defend her against it. Yeah. And then you realize the world is extremely predatory towards women. Yeah. Be careful. Congratulations, though. In a hypothetical universe, would you have wanted to cover a massive historical event like Inoue versus Nakatani, or Pride in its heyday, or Ryzen currently? Pride in its heyday. I knew guys who got to go over to Japan and watch Pride events in their heyday. I was so jealous of that. That one I missed. Yeah. Luke, why collab with Hassan Piker? I'm not. He supports Hamas and Houthis. Okay. He also used a shock collar on his dog and lied about it. I've seen some of those reports, though they remain conflicted. Not worth the heat to collab. We're not collabing. I've not done anything with him. And I have no love for Hamas or the Houthis, but I will say that they are the last line of defense against imperialist hegemonic forces that are trying to destroy the region. They're bad actors too, but they are bad actors in whatever capacity you would like to say that they are, in service of defending their own peoples in a way that we cannot claim that's what we are doing. SCOTUS voting right decision gives states carte blanche to gerrymander as much as they like. Oh, that's right. It's not on racial grounds, but on partisanship grounds. Yes, I saw that. It's going to be wild. Until there's a national gerrymandering ban, this is just what it's going to be now. It's going to be a race on both sides to gerrymander as much as it's terrible for the democracy, but what you going to do? Did you see that Mauricio Suleiman said Bud Crawford retired like a coward? Yes, I did. It feels like boxing itself is self-destructing without Zuffa. Am I wrong? No. Mauricio Suleiman is head of the World WBC, and he is indefensibly stupid. He is going to usher in. The good news about that is he's going to usher in his own demise. You know what I mean? He's going to usher it in. So his days are numbered in the sport as a leading figure. Luke, been watching since the MMA Beat and Sirius XM days. Thank you, my friend. You're the shit, bro. Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work over the years. Favorite MMA Beat memory? Mine is when y'all burst out laughing fit in the intro. God, dude, I haven't even thought about the MMA Beat in so long. I don't even know. When I did the MMA Beat, it was the favorite thing I had ever done. I was glad when it ended because we were so short-staffed. It was just a nightmare to try and book that show all the time. I don't know if I have a favorite memory, but I really, really loved doing it when we did it. Therapist here, right. Anxiety may never fully go away. The question is whether you're willing to feel it instead of avoiding it, because your anxiety and your goal/healing often occupy the same space. Wow. Your anxiety and your goal, your healing, often occupy the same space. Yeah. I have found that on some level, you just have to confront it. There's ways to do that the right way, but isn't it funny how often people like Rogan talk about honor and being a man, but never take responsibility? I mean, I don't know how much he talks about honor and being a man. You know what I mean? Granted, he hasn't taken responsibility for Trump boosting, but he's still doing it. So how could he? But I don't know what he says about those things. Gable or Bella Mir, who will have a better MMA career when it's all said and done? I say Mir. Honestly, I'm not a super big believer. Gable's a plus athlete and obviously a wrestler to the nth degree. But I don't know. Like, I've seen good wrestlers who just didn't like getting punched and it didn't work. We'll see. Not sure if you've covered this earlier, but do you think UFC 328 fight week is probably going to end up the most insane fight week since Khabib versus Conor? Dude, the security is going to have to be next fucking level. They're going to have to be in separate hotels. They're going to have to, and just think about this too. Think about the small details. Let me give you an example. In between rounds, keeping the corners separate. How about after the fight is over, everyone goes into the octagon and the decision is read? How about then? And how you keep all that separate? Like, you're going to have a fucking army keeping those two separate. No question in my mind. How would half points affect MMA scoring? We've done this before. Would it have prevented some of the wonky decisions recently? Congrats on 300 live episodes. Thanks. They have tried the half point episode on different trials through different commissions, and they found it lacking. It just doesn't meaningfully solve the problem. I'm not a big fan of the half point system. Have you seen OJ Made in America? I had the director on my SiriusXM show. It's the best doc I've ever seen, and the director had a 9-hour Prince project in the can, but got nixed by the estate, so it wasn't a puff piece. Yeah, dude, I had him on my show. Sure, bro. Have you watched any of Gamers Nexus about PC parts and the anti-consumerism from big companies in that space? No. Would you consider talking to them? I don't know who they are. I think that there is a lot of crossover in terms of the market state. Is this like the right to repair stuff? Like, some places don't want to have you have the right to repair your own stuff. I don't know if that's what you're talking about. Blood for Blood, Wednesdays, May 6th. Alex Terrible will be performing live in his band Slaughter to Prevail and fighting the same night for this BKFC event. Doesn't he have questionable views around Jews and stuff? Am I making that up? I might be making that up. Why don't fighters try to hit clamp guard or a side scissor within closed guard once they're there? They don't always try technical stand-up or sweep. I mean, you mean like a scissor sweep? A scissor sweep is it could work. A scissor sweep is going to be hard in MMA. Like a scissor sweep, for example, you have to kind of load them onto your shins a little bit, and then you switch them over. It's not just about like, I put it on the outside of the leg and then I roll them over that. You kind of have to pull them off their base a little bit, and that's a little bit easier with the gi or, if you got that. But it's like, requires, I don't know. I think the answer to all this stuff is just people just don't focus on these kinds of things as a priority in training. They just think you got a limited amount of time. I'm going to prioritize takedown defense or standing up. I'm not going to prioritize top to bottom sweeps. Now, some will, right? But like in general, most of them are just going to make decisions the other way around. Dave, thank you so much. Appreciate you. A pet peeve of mine is when commentators simply refer to a fighter's style as technical without much more description. What makes a fighter technical when is it a good descriptor for a guy's style? When they think of it as speaking a foreign language and you get the pronunciation right. There's a certain amount of effort that is put into every little part of it that clearly shows they are trying to do best practices at all times. Now, of course, they're going to fail at that, but like, think of it that way. Like, oh man, like I could barely hear his accent. Like he's really making sure on every part of every word and every sentence that they're trying to get that pronunciation just right. It's a certain adherence to technical best practices throughout the course of what you do consistently over time. As a newish father to a beautiful baby girl, What is your best advice for trying to not constantly be in fear for her future, given how fucked up the world is? Just enjoy as and deal with what comes. I don't know what else to do, my man. I don't know what else to do. Just try. I think partly is, you can protect them. And the other part is like, how are you going to teach them to protect themselves? Because that's really what it's going to be. You need to raise a little girl who is going to understand the threat that the world poses to her, which will make her aware of risk, good decisions, bad decisions, what people might be trying to manipulate or use her for, or any other kind of influence in that regard. Like that is the thing that I'm focused on mostly. I can shield from stuff. That's something you can do, but like teaching them how to navigate the world, that's the one that I'm focused on. What would you consider to be the sweet spot for the UFC in terms of how many fight cards should have per year, along with how much fights on said cards in order to have the best quality? I mean, if they compromised in one direction, I wouldn't complain about the other, right? If they cut fight cards in half and then kept the same amount of events, I'm like, well, it would solve one problem. I think the answer is probably around 7 fights. You could go a little higher, but maybe 10 fights at most. And then about 30 to 32, 33 events per year, I think is about the sweet spot. Luke, you mentioned your trip to Universal in LA. What was your favorite thing about the park? The Jurassic Park, the Jurassic World ride. It was a water ride. I love that park. Hope you and your family had a good time. Yeah, it was great. Also, the Mario World, like the Mario Kart ride at Universal in LA kind of sucks. But when you walk into the Mushroom Kingdom or whatever, it's incredible. You do feel like you're in a video game. It's insane. Third party can't win, so the rant is hypocritical. Bullshit. They can win local elections. They can win all kinds of stuff. I don't believe that. Hey, Luke, Dave from Australia. MVP's last fight was boring. Why not match him with Rakhmonov? Well, he's not available. Big test for MVP against someone that will bring it an easy return for Shavkat. You see training footage of him? He looked like he's got a long way to go. He's got a long way to go. Biggest question is how you choose books to read. Do you pick books that reinforce beliefs? Do you pick ones that challenge beliefs? Sometimes it can be both. Lots of books with bad ideas in them. The question is, I have questions that I'm trying to answer. That's the issue. Who do I trust? So kind of another one. And you're right. Sometimes you'll get halfway through a book. You're like, I think this guy's full of shit, or this didn't really answer my question. But that's my guiding principle. For example, I'll show you. I've got one here, and this book is a fucking slog. This one. The history of modern political philosophy, the rise and fall of rational control. Look at this name, Harvey C. Mansfield. So Harvey Mansfield, he's retired. He taught at Harvard for decades. He had one of the most requested courses. In fact, this is the course. The course is not the rise and fall of rational control, but the history of modern political philosophy, and it's basically retold through this book. And each book is it starts with Machiavelli, and then it goes into it goes into eventually Rousseau, and then it goes into Marx, and then all of these different folks involved in political philosophy. That guy is conservative. Like on the back of the book, look who bigs it up. It's Francis Fukuyama. Look at the other names. Okay, how about that? Tom Cotton. Wait, let me put that in front of my face. Tom Cotton, senator from Arkansas. He is a fucking super right-wing dude. And William Bennett, longtime intellectual, but a right-wing intellectual. So this book is incredible. I'll read from people who know what the fuck they're talking about, even if they have a different political opinion, but they got to have some credentials, right? And this one is an amazing read, but it's a really tough one. So I'll read stuff like that. But the way in which I kind of organize my time is around a question being answered. My wife and I are going to the Royal in DC. Any food wrecks? Get the ajiaco and get the the ajiaco there is so fucking good. The burger there is so good. The arepa is so good. The coffee is so good. Dude, they have the mixed drinks. Dude, just get anything. But the ajiaco in particular is pretty good. LT, based on yesterday's Supreme Court ruling and minority progress, was this the right time to scale back protections or just gerrymandering? It's the right time to scale back gerrymandering, but we're not there at all. Both sides are just, it's just an arms race. I find it laughable people expect Rogan to take responsibility. This is who he is now, whitewashing the Epstein list because his friends are on it. Yeah, basically that's right. Side scissor is a variation of close guard, clamp guard too. Danaher covers both. I'm curious due to your recent video on BJJ. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with them. They're not new concepts to me, but I don't, these are going to be, I mean, Danaher covers both for sport jiu-jitsu, I'm sure. I mean, they might have some relevancy for MMA. Most of these questions about like why people don't do stuff in MMA can be explained by the fact that there's strikes or the prioritization of their time constrains specialization. Just wanted to say it was a great setting to have a Donks in the Wild lunch with a fellow LT Substack donk. Good pizza, beer, and an awesome conversation. Politics, MMA fandom, book club. Thanks, LT. Yeah, great. I'm glad it worked out. Awesome stuff. All right. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Hey, 300. Here we go. May there be 300 more. Big thanks to our friends at Mando. Subscribe, share this around, all that kind of fun stuff. Reminder. MK tomorrow with Jimmy Smith. And then Saturday, I'll either have a watch along and post-fight show or a post-fight show. So either way, but I'll be here. Come see me. Okay? All right. I love you guys so much. Thank you for being a part of this live chat and every other one. I appreciate you so very much. Literally could not do this without you. Thank you for being here. Long may this continue if it can. And until next time, stay frosty. Bye, y'all.